Test. Ready. I'd like to welcome you guys back to the October meeting of the Madison County School Board. We have just finished our closed session, and the next thing that we have on our agenda is to do the certification of our closed session. So if I could have somebody read the certification statement, please.
Whereas the Madison County School Board has convened a closed meeting on this date pursuant to an affirmative recorded vote and in accordance with the provisions of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, and whereas Section 2.2-3712 of the Code of Virginia requires a certification by this school board that such closed meeting was conducted in conformity with Virginia law, therefore be it resolved that the Madison County School Board hereby certifies to the best of each member's knowledge, 1, only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements by Virginia law were discussed in the closed meeting to which this certification applies, and 2, only such public business matters as were identified in the motion convening the closed meeting were heard, discussed, or considered.
Ms. Patterson, would you call the roll, please? Oh, could I have a second?
I'll second.
We moved and seconded. Ms. Patterson, could you call the roll, please?
Mrs. Collier.
I certify.
Mr. Myers. I certify. Mr. Sheets.
I certify.
Mr. Wingate.
I certify.
Mrs. Allen.
I certify. Next thing on our agenda, and we hope you will join us, is with Pledge of Allegiance, and then a moment of silence, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You may be seated. Thank you. The next thing on our agenda is to approve the personnel matters that we discussed in closed session and the addendum for October the 10th, 2022. That includes the appointments, resignations, substitute appointments, and coaching stipends as presented. Could I have a motion for approval, please?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Could I have a second, please?
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the personnel matters for October the 10th as presented. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Motion carries. The next thing on our agenda is to approve the consent agenda as of September the 12th, 2020, as presented, which includes minutes and also the claims for operating expenses, food services, CIP, supplemental appropriation expenses, and the expenditure report. Could I have a motion to approve the consent agenda, please?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Could I have a second?
I'll second.
Been moved and seconded that we approve the consent agenda as presented. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. All right, motion carries. The next thing on our agenda is recognitions, and so the first thing is our Senior of the Month. Did I skip something?
No, I was trying to get my mic on. As Ms. Wynnum comes forward, we just want to remind everyone that the Senior of the Month program is a program that showcases a graduating senior, one each month during the school year, and recognizes them for their academics, their extracurricular activities, and their service to others. Each Senior of the Month will be recognized monthly at a board meeting with a presentation of a certificate, and then at the end of the year, we'll once again honor the seniors at a banquet, and that night they will in turn bring a staff member that's had an influence on their education, and they will honor them that evening. So we just wanted to give you some background, and Ms. Wyndham, you can present the October Senior of the Month.
I think so. Okay, our promise and mission at Madison County High School is to cultivate students through robust and relevant academic, social, and emotional learning experiences that ignite students' individual passions. Tonight, I'm excited to present to you a quality product of our academic and extracurricular programs at MCHS. Miss Vanessa Britton is a high school senior and a musician who plays piccolo and flute as a marching mountaineer and holds a very competitive grade point average. She's a teacher's dream in the classroom and devotes herself to success, but her high school experiences in band have ignited a passion for music and education. This semester, Vanessa serves as a teaching assistant and tutor for the middle school band program through her service learning class, but also during other times that she's available. I have witnessed her patient temperament among the middle school students and observed their faces as they pay close attention to her instruction. She probably didn't realize I observed her, but it's when she works with them in the cafeteria, I always walk by and see her with the group, and it's just, I don't know, I guess as a middle schooler, you look up to a high schooler, so it's just really, it's encouraging to see. So she easily gains their attention, and though she may not realize it, she's helping to guide students through finding their passion through her services to the middle school band program. Most recently, Vanessa was selected based on audition to participate in the 2023 Senior Regional Orchestra. She placed first on her instrument in an entire region and will now be included in this prestigious ensemble. Vanessa plans to continue her education after high school, and this is the most important part in music education, as she wants to become a middle school or high school band director. Vanessa, thank you for your contributions to our learning community at MCHS. We're so proud of you.
And Vanessa, we want to also congratulate you and thank you for what you bring to the senior class at Madison County High School. Our next recognition is Employee of the Month.
At this time, Mr. Kubicki, the principal of Waverly Yao, will announce our October Employee of the Month.
Sharon Machin as our Employee of the Month. Sharon has been an instructional assistant for the past 4 years. She is such an amazing asset to our school. When I think about Sharon, many adjectives come to mind. She is flexible, dependable, knowledgeable, caring, and patient. Sharon is eager to assist wherever she is needed most. She began as a 4th grade assistant where she assisted in our inclusion classroom. During COVID, she worked with students who learned virtually. Her knowledge of the curriculum and stellar data collection were tremendous help to both students and teachers. For the past 2 years, Sharon has been a one-on-one assistant for one of our high-need students. We couldn't ask for a better individual to work with this young man. Her high expectations were challenging him to strive to reach his full potential while demonstrating a caring demeanor and patience exemplifies the qualities of a wonderful paraprofessional. Mrs. Machin, you are such a valuable member of the Waverly family. It's a great pleasure that we honor you as Waverly Gal's Employee of the Month. Thank you for all that you do for us.
Again, we want to thank you for everything that you bring to Waverly Yao. A very special school, and it's full of special people, and we're glad that you got the recognition that I'm sure you deserve. So thank you. The next thing is our staff reports, and today we have Dr. Jones, who will be presenting an overview from the school principals of their school improvement plans. Dr. Jones?
Thank you. I am excited tonight that all of our principals are here joining me. I'm going to give a little introduction, and then they are each going to tell you about their school improvement plans and give you an overview with more detail on scores and such. But you can go ahead and next slide. And you can go to there we go, perfect. So just as a division overview, are they working on that? Okay. So we're working on that little box there. We apologize, but I'll continue on. We had talked previously in another meeting about comparisons with surrounding school divisions, and so we have provided that comparison tonight. This is for Waverly, and I'm not going to read through all of those scores. They are posted online in this PowerPoint, and so they're accessible, but you can see those. You can see that they're all within a similar range. Some divisions are a little higher, some are a little lower in all areas. Thank you, Taylor. And so this is, as I said, this is Waverly scores as compared to other local elementary schools in our region. You can go to the next slide. The next slide shows middle schools, reading, math, and science in comparison with other local middle schools in our region. And again, the scores are comparable. Some are a little higher, some a little lower, generally. And then the next slide shows high school. And I will say, same thing here, but we are working as a region through our Region 4 instructional leaders. We are part of a consortium, Virginia School Learning, and all of those organizations are working together to develop plans based on scores and score reports to help provide professional development for our teachers. So that is one thing, and you'll hear other things tonight that we're doing, but that is one way we are all together in this across the state and working together to address the scores. All right, and so again, division level supports. We are monitoring the continuous improvement plans of the school division, of the schools, excuse me. We hold weekly school leadership meetings. Central office meets with our principals each week. We discuss scores, what needs schools have, and analyze data and such together. We participate in administrative school walkthroughs, where we go into each school and we go into classrooms, and we have particular look-fors, and we support the principals in providing data on what's happening in classrooms. And then we have one-on-one coaching for principals with directors at central office. And we also provide support through professional development. You've heard me talk a little bit about that already. We have about 17 teachers taking a literacy course this year called Letters, and it is about the science of reading, which should really strengthen our literacy program from the bottom up. We provide information for parents, and I'm going to talk more about that in the next few slides. I'm going to show you what individual growth assessment reports look like. And then as far as funding, we have money set aside to support. We have money set aside for professional development. We have hired student success coaches for the primary school, Waverly and Wetzel. We have hired a math interventionist for grades 3 through 5. And we provide principals with additional per pupil funding to support their school-based instructional plans that measure and address academic impact of the loss of learning and instructional time that we have had in the past few years. And so I do want to talk a little bit about the individual growth assessments. We spoke, I think, last month about the fact that grades 3 through 8 are taking assessments in the fall, the winter, and then the SOL in the spring. And so the DOE has developed the Virginia Assessment Parent Portal. And so parents can go in and access their children's assessment reports, and they get very detailed reports, and I'll show you those in just a moment. Parents can find their children's scores, the detailed reports, and there are videos that help explain those reports. The next slide. So for fall and winter, and I believe board members, you all have an example of this. For fall and winter, it's your second, not the cover page, but the second and third page. Parents get a report that shows each question. It gives like a summary of each question. For example, in the spring, a student had a question on comparing and ordering fractions. It tells a parent whether the question their child took was a high level, a medium level, or a low level, and whether the student got that question right or wrong. So parents know down to the actual SOL how their child did on the growth assessment, which is very detailed, and it's important, and I think it's good, and they can really support the schools because they're going to know exactly where their students missed and didn't, and were able to achieve on these tests. So that is done for spring and fall, and then next slide, in the spring we actually have the SOL. That's your front page that you have. And on that, they get the scale. Parents have the scaled score, whether it's a pass, a fail, a pass advance, and then they have that same information. Each SOL that was tested, whether the student's question was high, medium, or low, because it is a test that moves with the child's ability. So some questions are high, middle, or low, depending on how a child answers the previous question. And then whether they got those questions correct or not. And so what we have done for the growth assessment, principals at Waverly and Wetzel, those are the schools that take the growth assessment, received every student's detailed question report, which is what you have a sample of. So they have that for every student, so they can see for every student what they got right and what they got wrong. The Department of Ed created videos for our teachers to watch to help explain the tests and the reports. And then parents, on October 4th, every parent of a 3rd through 8th grader should have received login instructions so that they can log in and see their child's report online and view the videos that pertain to their child's report, which are very good. They're very specific, and they explain how to use the reports. So parents have a lot of information, and teachers will work with parents at conferences when they're speaking about the children's academics to discuss these further, answer any questions. Our teachers know all about this. They're using this to drive their instruction and their remediation plans with students in grades 3 through 8. And reminder, this is for reading and math. And so that's a little bit more about those assessments. And I'll answer any questions you have on this part, because next we're going to call up Mr. Coiner to talk about his school plans. But if you have any questions about this, I'm happy to answer them.
I do. Do we have any way of knowing if the parents are accessing this information and if they are able to understand it enough to help their children?
So I think, so again, the information just went home last Tuesday.
Okay.
So it's very new to parents. I don't know if you've heard, I haven't heard of anybody calling in with questions as of yet, but conferences are at the end of this week, and so this will be a big part of parent conference discussion. And so teachers will be bringing attention to parents. So if they didn't get the letter, parents will know about it when they attend conferences, and they can ask questions then and there, so we can help with that at that time. These reports can be talked about between parents and teachers. But I don't know if there's a way to see. I'm not aware of any way for us to look and see if they've been accessed or not. I don't know that that's a possibility, but I'll find out. I'm not sure. It's a great question.
Sometimes when the parent comes in for a conference, there's so much information that they're not able to, remember everything. So is there somewhere where they can call if they get home and they look at this and they think, exactly what does this mean? Do they call the principal or the teacher?
So when the codes went home on Tuesday, they went home with a letter. It gave them, it explained what it was. These are codes so you can access your child's scores. And it gave them their login information. And it told them in the letter to contact the school if they had questions. And so certainly parents that aren't sure of what it means or how to read the reports can contact the school, and we'll be happy to help them, absolutely.
Anybody else have any questions on this particular part?
And again, when they log in, there are videos also. If parents are able to log in, there's a video that's really clear and really is good at explaining their child's scores and what they mean. So I think that'll be helpful as well.
Thank you.
Sure.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Sheets has a question.
Oh, okay.
How much time in the classroom is dedicated to teaching just toward SOL tests?
Is your question, how much time are teachers dedicating to?
Just SOL-related answers and questions and answers? Or do they, how much time is spent by the teachers to just focused on SOL testing in preparation for that?
I'm not sure. I mean, so everything we teach is based on the SOLs, so all the content,
So all the teaching that we do is based on SOL?
that's our curriculum. Does that answer your question?
It does, and it concerns me because for this particular student, with the number of X's, which means the student answered incorrectly or didn't provide a response, if we're spending all of our time teaching toward SOLs, we should have a lot less X's in this.
And you'll hear from the principals what we're doing to address that. As part of what they're going to share tonight is how we're addressing and remediating when students are not answering correctly.
Thank you, okay.
Yeah.
This is still the kind of test that
It-
changes for the high and the low, and if the child misses a lot, it lowers the level of the question.
That is true.
It's
It's
same-
adaptive.
same-
It moves with the child.
Adaptive.
Yes, it's adaptive. That is
Okay.
true.
Thank you.
That is true. Anything else? Well, I will introduce
The high school?
go back. Yeah, if you want to go back to that high school page, that would be fine.
Thank you.
It was, yeah,
And in the-
no reason for that. Just snapping through
In
that.
the back also, can you help us out? And if you cannot hear, would you throw your hands up and just thank you, and just let us know that you can't hear us? Thank you. And there's your high school again.
Mr. Sheeds, you asked about that score. It's interesting, you're talking about all the X's, but the student did pass this test. Just as a point of reference. Isn't that interesting? I just find it interesting.
I mean,
I'm
when the
not-
scale is 0 to 600 and passing is right there at 400.
Sure.
There's a lot of room for improvement.
Not disagreeing with that.
Let me ask one more question while we're here. This test, was this student average, low score, high score? What was, because this is just one representation.
You mean the actual score on this assessment?
Well,
That's
this one here
400
is
is-
one student.
right, 400 is the mark for passing. So in this sample would be,
Right.
they got a 408, so that
But
was just
per,
barely passed.
but for Waverly school-wide, is this
Go-
average?
If he goes back to the Waverly data, there you go. So this is the reading SOL, so it was 52% pass. Right.
I'd like to know I'd like to know the top scores and see what they were, and then what do we do that those kids got those scores, and then what we can do for everyone else to get them up to that level? Okay, thank you.
Good question.
Okay, so Mr. Coiner, I believe we are ready for you to come and talk to us about the primary school.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to come and share with you tonight. I do appreciate it. We're going to share a little bit of data with you tonight and a few of the things that we're doing to recover from learning loss. So if we just go ahead and go to that next slide. Okay, that, if you will look at that first graph there, that shows a 3-year trend school-wide for PALS reading results. We're going with reading first. Looking at the blue bar on top there at 81.2%, that's 2019, and that's a score we're fairly accustomed to achieving, somewhere between 80 and 85% for the years prior to that and leading to that. In fact, one year at 86% leading up to that time. And then the red bar you see, of course, is what represents the learning loss from 19 to 21. Certainly more than we had hoped for, but at the same time, not completely unexpected. And then that third bar is 2022 is a representation of the recovery that we've made so far. So it's 63.4%. We expected going into this that this would be a 2-year process. I think I had spoken to the board previously. A couple of members of the board were at that presentation. So looking forward after 1 year of recovery efforts, we're about where we expected to be. So if we showed an increase of 15.4%, if we're able to achieve that same increase, and obviously we're hoping for a little bit more, that would bring our average back up to 78.8%. So we're in the neighborhood. I think making pretty good progress. I wish I had actual state numbers, but I don't right now. But what we do have is a state summary statement from the PALS report. And looking at the first part of that, the rate of students scoring below the PALS benchmark decreased from spring 21 to spring 22. However, the 22 below benchmark rate remained higher than that of spring 2019. So we see that same trend with our school. I don't know what those direct numbers are, but I would imagine that they're pretty similar. The report goes on to say that compared to kindergarten and first grade students, second graders showed the least improvement in below benchmark rates from spring 21 to spring 22. So looking at this graph on the bottom, you'll see that we don't follow that pattern. The slowest rate of growth that we had was with that first grade group at 11%. Our kindergarten and second grade groups actually achieved at a higher rate than the first grade group. So a little bit different there. It's very important to note that that first grade group is a group that would have had their preschool year ended in March and their kindergarten year on a hybrid virtual on-site model, and then their first grade year back in the school with the regular schedule. And that second grade group would have had their kindergarten year cut short in March, would have experienced that hybrid model for first grade and then second grade back in the school. So, you know, the growth of that second grade group is encouraging to us. And I think that there's no reason we can't show that same growth with that group of first graders as we move into this second year of recovery. So while we're not super excited about what we're seeing, I don't think that we're seeing anything different than what other people are seeing. It's you know, take a deep breath and move forward, and I think we've done that. And I think we've made decent progress. If we go on to the next slide. We do have some direct comparison data for kindergarten because we've received our state VKRP report. So you'll notice that our kindergartners last year, 80% scored above benchmark on the spring PALS, while 28% scored below, with the state average being 78% above and 22% below. So we're right there. We're right there with the average, actually just slightly better than the average. So I think what this tells us is that what we're doing in general and what we have been doing is good, and students are achieving. Can we go back? Go forward. Right there. We also have, and I just wanted to point this out because we have a comparison of students in the kindergarten PALS from last year related to their preschool experience. And you'll notice that students that attended our preschool at MPS, 90% of those students achieved benchmark, 10% did not. Students that attended other preschool programs other than ours, 78% achieved benchmark and 22% did not. Those that did not go to preschool, 70% achieved benchmark and 30% did not. I mention this because it's encouraging news, and it sort of supports our decision to move to a full-day preschool program. And so I think that this is going to be a great thing for our kids. And I wanted just to throw that in there just as maybe a little kudos to our preschool program. We have outstanding preschool teachers, and they've done a super job, and they've adapted to this full-year program quite well. And so I look for even better results coming from that as well. Now, going into this, we can go ahead and go to the next slide. We sort of looked at recovery efforts as needing to increase our capacity to serve struggling students and increase the efficiency of the programs that are already in place. I mean, those look like the way that we need to attack this. So that's sort of the mindset that we went in with. So the first thing we did was that we re-examined our quarterly pacing guides. And we've done this a number of times already. The first time we re-examined and adapted was to account for those 2 months of school that we missed in that initial closing from March to May. And how could we incorporate the SOL instruction that students missed during that 2 months and incorporate that into their next year and adjust pacing guides to handle that. Since then, we have continued to work on pacing guides just as from an efficiency standpoint, trying to make the best out of every instructional minute that we have. And that is ongoing at this moment. Right now, what we're doing with pacing guides is reformatting all of the documents, and as we move in to this new curriculum, adapting our pacing guide to align with the new curriculum. So as we move through the year, this year, we'll be adapting that pacing guide and looking for ways to be efficient with that as well. And I mentioned the open court reading curriculum. We have implemented that new curriculum. And I think we're implementing with care. Some of you, I'm sure, are aware of this, but there certainly is evidence out there that when you implement a new curriculum, scores frequently drop. So we want to go in with that in mind. And why do those scores drop? And as we looked at the open court program, I think that that the program assumes a couple of things. I think it assumes, number one, that you don't have a strong tiered system in place, and it assumes experience with the curriculum. And by that I mean the second grade curriculum assumes that those same students have had the kindergarten and the first grade curriculum with open court. So we have to be cognizant of that as we move forward. One thing that we've done is this system is very, very heavy on assessments at young ages. Now, the time that it takes to assess is time that we're not instructing, and that's something that we need to take a long look at. We feel like we have a strong system in place. I think we've shown that we have a strong system in place, and we have a strong assessment system in place. So we're looking at the need to use all of those assessments that are attached to that program, and how can we get the biggest bang for our buck, per se, and gain those instructional minutes in that way. And also, when we want to be sure that we're providing appropriate Tier 1 instruction to students in the classroom. There are going to be students, and I use second grade as an example, that need some prep work moving into that curriculum because they haven't had that open court curriculum before. So we need to be aware of that moving in, and we need to provide that support for students at the Tier 1 level, not necessarily the intervention level, to make sure that we're getting everything we need into that Tier 1 instruction. We're also continuing and expanding tiered services. I wanted the addition of the success coach. I should have just pulled up and put with that, because one thing that we've done was to add that success coach, which increased our capacity to serve students by about 50%. We also shifted from a pull-out to a push-in service at the Tier 2 level. This is also looking at efficiency. Our numbers at Tier 2, and when we looked at those students that were not achieving that PALS benchmark, most of them landed in that Tier 2 range. And we were pulling students to offer Tier 2 intervention in years past, and we just needed to stop that. It was too many students. They were missing too much Tier 1 instruction as a result of that, and taking too much transition time moving back and forth between the classrooms they were working in. So we shifted to a push-in model to simply to save time and to be able to serve more students. And then we also increased our collaborative and direct support of fine and gross motor development. And this is not necessarily a database decision or a data-driven decision. This is feedback that we got from classroom teachers, that students were coming into the classroom not knowing the correct way to hold a pencil. So the actual task of writing became laborious, and then students resisted it. So, cutting with scissors, that sort of thing. It was more of a struggle than it has been in the past. So we had our OT collaborate with classroom teachers and then offer some direct support to students in that area as well. And then another thing that we did, because I think that we showed some success with that, we incorporated that into that full-day preschool program. So now, as a part of their specials rotations, students in preschool are getting fine and gross motor development, language development, as well as library in their specials rotation in preschool. So every 3 days, they're getting one of those 3 things. So we're able to offer that support, and we feel great about that. We can go on to the next slide. Math, we see a similar trend. Again, 81.3%, fairly typical over time. The learning loss was not as severe. We dropped down to 64%, and then last year back up to 71.34%. But what did remain the same was that rate of growth. It does still look like it's going to take us that 2 years to get ourselves back to over 80%. But again, we're headed in the right direction. MAP, we don't have a comparison for. That's not a statewide test. That's a program that we've chosen to use to measure student progress. It is associated with national norms, which I think is important. There actually is not a statewide math assessment between kindergarten and 3rd grade. So you go from the VKRP in kindergarten to the SOL test in 3rd grade. But MAP has been a pretty good tool for us. But we do have some comparison data for kindergarten in the VKRP assessment, and we can see that last year's scores, our kindergarten, 85% achieved above benchmark, while 15% did not. The state average was 75% and 25%. So that's significant above state average. The kindergarten map at the end there is what we use to identify students for intervention. So you'll notice that that number is a little higher than the VKRP number, and it typically is. What we do with MAP is we establish the 35th percentile as a cutoff point. So any student that is achieving below the 35th percentile is going to get Tier 2 math intervention. Any student who scores below the 10th percentile is going to get Tier 2 and Tier 3 math support. That 35th percentile is a number that we took straight from the MAP linking study, I think they called it. They did a linking study with Virginia SOLs, and they established the 35th percentile as being sort of that spot where students are likely to pass an SOL test. So that's where that 35% comes from. And I would tell you that most school divisions go 25%. So we are serving more students probably than most people are, and frankly, in most divisions, that number would be lower because they wouldn't be serving students above the 25th percentile. So we feel good about our capacity to do that. We can go on to the next slide. Action steps for math. The pacing guides, again, we talked about already, but that's going to be true with all subject areas. Our classroom-based Tier 2 intervention, we have teachers providing that Tier 2 level intervention and progress monitoring students. That goes for 30 minutes daily. It's 30 minutes every day except once a month is assessment time. So we progress monitor the Tier 2 level on a monthly basis. And then at Tier 3, we continue to do a pull-out intervention, which is a more intensive intervention. It's 20 minutes daily, and we progress monitor those students on a weekly basis. We've done this for years, by the way. This is not something that we just started. We've always progress monitored students in this way, and we're able to create a growth chart for each child that is receiving those services so we can keep a very close eye on student growth. We use CBMs, which are very responsive to change, so we're able to see on a weekly basis whether a student is making progress or not. If we see several data points in a row that are below a student's aim line, then we start talking about something. We start talking about whether we need to change the intervention. We start talking about whether or not we need to look at maybe further testing to see if there could be a learning disability for this child. So we keep pretty close eye on those numbers. Also, we have used number talks, 3-act tasks in math classrooms, and these assist with, well, they're collaborative math activities, but they assist in students gaining a deeper mathematical understanding. So more than just 2 + 2 is 4, well, why does 2 + 2 equal 4? And we encourage students to talk to one another about what they're learning in both of those activities. And we also have a weekly STEAM class, which, again, is sort of formulated on that same concept to create a deeper understanding. Okay, next slide. And for science, we, again, have looked at quarterly pacing guides, but we've also acquired Generation Genius, which is a digital-based program. It's a lot of videos and interactive activities for students, and also themed leveled readers. So we got leveled readers that were associated with Virginia SOLs. This goes to efficiency. You know, it's you know, 2 birds with 1 stone, right? There's no reason that we can't use science content to teach reading and incorporate reading into science classrooms as well. We're also this year looking at performance matters assessments. Some time ago, we used to have a program called Interactive Achievement that we were able to put all of our unit tests, and these were 2nd grade tests. I don't know that we really want to pursue this for kindergarten and 1st grade, but certainly for 2nd grade. And it's a good introduction, I think, to an SOL format. We'll be able to design these tests that require students to do some of the things that they'll need to do on the SOL test, and by that I mean the actual task of taking the test, like the drag and drops and the using the tools to solve problems. So we're going to get all of our science and social studies unit tests into performance matters. And what this also does for us is it will break down the data into gap groups for us, so we can look a little more closely at what those student gap groups are doing. And lastly, maintain a watchful eye on Tier 3 intervention pullout for reading and math. I think the impact that we saw on science scores this year has as much to do with reading as it does science, at least as much, if not a little more, for a couple of reasons. We could see the learning loss, so we know that students are not at the same reading level that they have been in years past, and unless Mr. Kubricki knows something I don't know, I don't think they changed the readability of the test. And also, when we're providing reading and math intervention, that time comes from somewhere. And I think maybe too often it came from science, right? Or it came from social studies. You know, just looking at the numbers, I'm sure you understand. I'm sure everyone across the country understands the positions that schools are in right now. And, you know, we haven't had increases in our length of our school day. So a little bit of, rob Peter to pay Paul, but we need to keep a watchful eye on that, because I think it has shown up a little bit. And I think, as you saw the comparison of other school divisions, I believe it's shown up there as well. But being aware, accepting where we are, being honest with ourselves, and moving forward. And I think we're in a good spot. None of us are in the spot that we'd like to be, but I think we're in a good spot considering. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Corner. Questions from anybody? Mr. Corner, are you seeing, as the children progress through, and I know you've only got 1 year where saw the scores drop as much, are you seeing that the children that are getting the Tier 3 interventions are staying the same children from year to year to year, or are they moving up so that they're independent learners?
We see much more movement at the Tier 2 level.
At Tier 2?
At the Tier 2 level, which would make sense. And we do see some movement at the Tier 3 level as well. But I would say as we've moved through this process over the last couple of years, our Tier 3 numbers have been much less affected than our Tier 2 numbers. Much, much less affected than our Tier 2 numbers. So, students at the Tier 3 level that continue not to make progress, again, are the students that we want to look at to see if they need to be provided with other services, and oftentimes they do. And I think a lot of people look at this as being a part of the special education process, and to a degree it is, because we want to make sure that we give students everything that we have to give them before we decide that, oh, well, we need to look at special education. We don't take that decision lightly, and we don't make that decision without evidence to back it up. So I think it's normal that there is less movement at that Tier 3 level, but there is some movement.
Thank you. Anil?
Yeah, could you just briefly, at the risk of sounding ignorant here, what exactly does push-in services at the Tier 2 level look like?
We have 3 interventionists that spend time at each grade level. So we're able to, we only have 5 classrooms at kindergarten now, but 6 classrooms at first and 6 at second. So those 3 individuals are able to push into every single classroom for 45 minutes every day. 45 minutes is enough time, certainly, to do 1 solid intervention lesson and possibly 2 intervention lessons within that time. So those 3 people are traveling from kindergarten to first grade to second grade, and that's their job for the day. They provide intervention services at each of those grade levels in the classroom rather than pulling students out to go to an alternate space.
So I'm assuming that these time saving is the travel between different rooms, because I mean they can only learn one thing at a time.
That is true. So the transition time, as you might imagine, with 5- and 6-year-old children can be significant. So we have certainly added instructional minutes by doing that. And it's also less disruptive to the teacher's instruction, because the teacher is still able to have all of those students on site in the classroom throughout that time. And we might come to a day where it's extremely important that every student in that classroom receives a particular piece of instruction. We're going to make sure that that happens. Those students will be there for that.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
When I look at those numbers, and I think we're obviously in this huge hole that, through nothing that could have been done here in Madison, as a national issue. So I guess thank you for being, sober eye, but also positive about, that this huge hole that we're in. So it doesn't do any good not to be sober about it like you are, but also positive. So I appreciate your kind of balanced approach in that way. Do you think, I don't know, I've been thinking about this and really struggling, trying to figure out, what do we do different? I mean, this is a whole new situation we're in, right? I mean, this crazy lockdowns and all this crazy stuff. I'm just trying to think, are we being creative enough. And I've been trying to think about how can we as a board be creative. I mean, it's a new situation. How, are we being creative enough and thinking about what do we do to handle this huge learning loss that's unprecedented? And I was thinking, I read a really good article, just for an example, and this is kind of a rhetorical question, sort of, but just kind of curious to see what everybody thinks, and also, for the division leaders. I read a really good article today about at the level of children where you're leading, especially the importance of sort of one-on-one or individualized attention when it comes to reading, and how do we think about being really creative in maximizing that amount of time for those students, and things like, as a board, as more teachers' aides, or as a parent volunteers, or how do we get those children to have that amount of time to really learn how to read, which is that, if they can't read, as you said, if they can't figure out how to read, then the science is never going to happen, right? And so it's a hard question. I just wonder if we're being creative enough across the country, but also here in Madison. Sorry, hard question.
Well, I wish I had the answer for you. We would certainly be doing it, but I think that, again, being efficient with the time that we have is important. Anything that we can do cross-curricular, anything that we can combine with other subjects is a plus. Providing smaller numbers comes with big dollars. We talk about increasing teaching staff to the point where we could have the kind of small groups that you speak of is probably financially unattainable. So it's difficult. And, I wish I had a better answer.
Do you think, I talk a lot about, parent rights and parental empowerment and stuff, and I mean, as a parent of a child, I think we parents have to be ready to sort of help too. Is there room for us to think about bringing parents into the classroom more as volunteer aides? It doesn't cost them money, but giving some one-on-one time for those students?
It's an intriguing possibility. I think it needs to be consistent. So if we can find groups of parents that are willing to give of their time on a consistent basis, then I think we could probably make something work. I think it's always helpful, and any parent that wants to come in and read with children, it always helps. But if we want to see true gains, I think we need a program in place that's going to be consistently serving children.
Anybody else? Thank you, Mr. Coiner.
Thank you.
Good evening, thank you, everyone. Next slide, obviously. So you've all seen the scores. Our raw pass rates have really dropped the past few years. Before the pandemic, we're looking at 20 to 30 points less than we're used to before the pandemic. With our raw pass rates, our pass rates with student growth look fine, but we still have a lot of work to do. We'll move on to the next slide. Our reading action steps for improvement. We have adopted the open court textbook, same as the primary school, which follows the science of reading. It involves a lot of read alouds, use of phonics word study, small group instruction, which they call workshop. We've implemented a common planning day with our instructional coach on Thursdays, where they're following the curriculum framework. In the classrooms, we use something called Lexia Core 5. It's a computer-based program. I did want to mention we are really trying to decrease screen time in the classroom. So it's a very good program, but we are really trying to decrease screen time. We've had to talk about getting creative with our small group instruction. We use the Lexia program, but it's led by different instructors. Our instructional coach, Dr. Reese, our media specialist, our art teacher. So we've had to get creative before school, during school, after school, and pooling these Tier 3 students, and they get progress monitored every 2 weeks. If you would click on the resources for our teachers, something really great that our new instructional coach created. Oh, maybe not. Go back. I don't know if you'll be able to access that on the presentation. We checked this afternoon. Well, if you just want to go back, I guess. Maybe. This website that our instructional coach created, it's kind of a catch-all for everything. It includes, there it is. And I was told by Dr. Reese, make sure you scroll down because there's a lot of great things. You can, like the helpful sites and resources. She did a great job. So it's kind of right there for teachers that they can access. Go back. Next slide. The additional reading data for guiding instruction. We give that Virginia Growth Assessment in the fall and winter, and our teachers also get these student detailed question reports for each student, so it kind of shows their areas of weakness and strength, and that can guide small group instruction based on their need, and the assessments also can be used to monitor student grade level progress throughout the year. We also administer local assessments late fall, which will be coming up in a couple weeks, and in the spring. Again, guiding small group instruction based on their need. They can spiral the skills throughout the year, and these assessments also can monitor student grade level progress throughout the year. We also do something called data days, where they can spend some time, like we are giving a science map test this week, so on Friday they have a work day. We can talk about this a little bit more once I get to the science portion, but they can actually dig into the data and plan and work with our instructional coach and adjust instruction as needed. Next slide. Math data, again, we're looking probably like a 30% drop, 30-point drop in raw pass rates. Our math scores were really good in the past. So before the pandemic, we were really rolling, and so we have quite a bit of learning loss. With the student growth, it looks good, but again, we want to get those raw pass rates. We're not satisfied with these scores, obviously. Next slide. Math, action steps for improvement, daily spiral review, constantly reviewing math concepts each day, every morning. We do SOL quick checks. Last year, we introduced the Bridges Intervention Program, which is done 3 times a week for 30 minutes with our math interventionist. Again, we have IXL and Reflex math programs, computer programs, but again, we're really trying to be more teacher-led in our instruction. So they are great programs, but we're trying to lessen that screen time, because during the pandemic, they were really exposed to a lot of screen time. Our math interventionist works with our Tier 3 students and also models lessons for our teachers. Again, they have a common planning day with our coach, following the curriculum framework and really working together to plan. And again, the resources for the teachers on the website. I'm gonna click on that if it'll work. Very similar. You can see the framework. If you scroll down, even Miss Weigel's website is on there. Go open Virginia, the math quick checks. So it's kind of a catch-all for our teachers to utilize. It's been great. Just in time, quick checks. You can go back. What's the instructional report? Instructional report, maybe to the bottom right. Is that it? There you go. And then just you can scroll down. Not the browser. Slide 23. Oh, okay. Coming at me. So, just like our reading, we have our Virginia growth assessments in the fall, winter. Again, teachers receive their detailed question reports that can help guide small group instruction for our tier 2 and 3 students. Assessments are used then to monitor student progress throughout the year. Again, we're giving 2 local assessments. Same kind of concept, small group instruction based on our student needs, skills being spiraled throughout the year, and the assessments being used to monitor student grade level progress. And again, getting together on these data days and really digging into our data to see how we can help our students and adjust instruction as needed. Okay. So science, we are in school improvement. In science, we have dropped from 83 before the pandemic down to 60%. We don't have growth in science. We do have a lot of work to do, but I'm confident we will get there. If you want to go to the next slide, I can. So some of our action steps, we've incorporated daily spiral review. On the 5th grade math or science SOL test, it's a combination of 4th and 5th grade standards. So a lot of these students before the pandemic were missing out a lot of instruction on the 4th grade standards. So we've really had to go back and adjust our teaching, have daily spiral review. We've had a lot of hands-on learning. We've really increased our hands-on learning. The state has really stressed that to us in incorporating the 5E model, which is engage, explore, explain, elaborate, and evaluate. We utilize Go Open Virginia. I think you may have seen that on Ms. Utz's website that she creates, a database of lessons for Virginia teachers. Again, they have a common planning day with our instructional coach, and again, the resources for the teachers. You can see the Go Open Virginia. That's been very helpful. They found that they've a lot of good stuff. Okay, you can go back. Next. Additional science data for guiding instruction. This year, we are giving the measures of academic progress, a MAP test in the fall and spring. That's new. The middle school has been doing that the past few years, and it's really provided a good baseline. General science knowledge, we're giving it actually this week, so the teachers can then use that data to spiral skills throughout the year. We also will give some local assessments in the winter before we leave for winter break and early spring. Again, taking that data and spiraling our skills throughout the year, and then these assessments can monitor student grade level progress throughout the year from winter to spring. And again, on these data days, get together and dig into the data and adjust instruction as needed. History, same story. We're probably 30 points less before the pandemic. Mike was mentioning kind of that cross-curricular approach. We've done that a lot in history. Language arts and history kind of lend themselves to each other. So there's a lot of cross-curricular learning opportunities with reading and writing, a lot of project-based learning, authentic assessments, field trips and presenters to help support our history standards. And again, our website for our teachers. I don't know if you want to click on it, but it's very similar. So we have a lot of work to do. We know we're in a hole. Everyone's working extremely hard. I'm confident, we will get where we need to be. Have any questions?
I just want to, can you forward us the resources for teachers? Because we're getting an error message. We can't get to
That'd
any
be
of that.
great.
That'd be great.
It's pretty impressive.
I would love to see it.
Yeah, it's great.
How's that open court curriculum? You like it?
It's going well. I think what Mike was saying too, you have to be kind of careful. When you guys came, was it Thursday? We watched a third grade class, and I would say she was doing a great job. They were really doing a very good job with it. They really liked the phonics piece to it, the read alouds. A lot of kids are below grade level, so hearing grade level material and that background knowledge and modeling is a big piece.
And I think just kind of an encouragement, I appreciate your talking about decreasing screen time. I think that's awesome. That's awesome. And I thought about one of the cool things I've seen in the school visits that's really great, I think, is when you bring that, I see in high schoolers in the classroom teaching them, that's sort of free labor. It's free labor, but it's also good for the high schooler too. And so it's, to encourage, I think it's awesome. And to bring,
So the
to do
students
that
are
more and
great.
more and to partner with the high school folks,
Yeah, they're
I
great.
think is a great tool to try to get us out of the learning loss without costing too much.
Right.
And it's good for everybody. It's kind of a win-win thing. So it's good work.
Yeah,
they're doing there.
they've been wonderful for years. And Miss Allen, when you were there, we use them. They've been great.
Any other questions for Mr. Kubricki? Thank you, Mr. Cook.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you for your time. So yeah, as we dive deep into Wetzel Middle School and our data here, I will preface with the same sentiments that we are definitely taking let's look forward. Let's see what we can do to kind of remedy this, how we can support kids. What do we need to do? And that's going to be an ongoing process. So certainly what you're going to hear tonight is not all-encompassing. There's a lot of nitty-gritty work that's going to be done throughout the year and in the years to come still to try to help. So we can go to the first slide. Thanks. So again, you'll see our raw rates. They're raw with growth. There was a little bit of improvement. So these are our reading scores. We can go to the next slide. So we have a couple different ways that we are looking at our students' data to help guide instruction, right? And so the whole point of these growth assessments, the whole point of local assessments is really for teachers to look at where trends are happening, where patterns are happening, and how can we scaffold that instruction, how can we spiral it, how can we go back to the drawing table and figure out a different way to teach something because, our students have very different learning styles from each other, and so to address them all in one fashion, it's not a one-size-fits-all. So we do the Virginia growth assessments, fall and winter, which you've heard about plenty this evening. There we're identifying the gap groups, areas that we have, targeting those related skills, scaffold the instruction, and look at those trends. From that, we do pair that up with some classroom assessments and other pieces to determine our level of tiered instruction for our kiddos. We do have a program in place that is an evidence-based intervention program called Reading Plus that we have our students complete or interact with, learn from. That also comes with a progress monitoring tool, which is important. Something new that is new to us this year is we determined that this is great, but we need something to look at as we're teaching each 9 weeks to look at that data very specifically. So it's new to our teachers this year, and they are all getting ready to give the first one this week or next week. They are nine-week benchmark assessments. The idea of those is they're taking the material that they've taught within this first 9 weeks, the units that they've covered, and then they are going to have another piece to ensure that they are looking at areas where students have understood the content and where they have not, and they're going to address that in their teaching. They're going to scaffold that into the next sets of units. And how can we revisit this, reteach? And so hopefully that is going to be an asset to our teachers to help guide their instruction. They do have unit assessments that they complete after each unit has been taught. Next slide. So some of our action steps, we are going to be completing an academic review, which is a tool from the state. That is one of the pieces I say as we start to dive deep into the meat of things. We will hopefully uncover other practices or pieces that we need to address and come up with other strategies to help our students. We intend to implement and monitor a process to review and provide feedback on English lesson plans for our teachers. We want to ensure that the alignment is there and that the cognitive level that the standard is asking for is being addressed. That's huge. Of course, we do have our new HMH textbooks, and those are rolling right along. Just a caveat there. So one feedback that I'm hearing from teachers, they're just all over that, when there's a reading piece, it sounds so silly, but there's actual open space to the right of it where they can annotate as they're reading. So students are writing all kinds of ideas off to the side, and they're taking little notes and making use of highlighting information. So that it seems silly, but just having writing space on the page with the passages has been enlightening, and students are writing, which is awesome. So that's a great piece. Our tiered reading intervention, writing enrichment, so that is 30 minutes, 4 times a week. That is within the English classroom, so it is the last 20 minutes. There will be a group of students who are receiving that Reading Plus evidence-based program, and then there will be students who are working with our evidence-based writing program that will be getting enrichment. So we have kind of 2 different groups happening in the classroom. Most of those classrooms do have support of 2, either an instructional assistant, a special education teacher, and the general education teacher, so that they can run those groups effectively. We will be providing professional development for our English teachers and SPED teachers on evidence-based strategies and practices. We're kind of going back to the good old basics of Marzano and Hattie research because we know that they're proven to work. So we are diving deep, and there will be ongoing professional development for our teachers in that, and as we look at our practices. Coaching feedback, we are fortunate to have an instructional coach, and so he is in classrooms and providing feedback to teachers on lesson planning, on lesson delivery, ensuring that alignment and such. And then our teacher goals are going to be aligned to support our gap group needs, because if you looked at our data, you could see that we do need to address our gap groups and where they are struggling, and so the teacher goals are aligned to that too, so we have a focus. Next slide, sorry. Math scores, you can see a drastic change between our raw rates and our growth, which growth is still below, where we typically perform as well, usually in the 80th, 90th percentiles in years past. Next slide. Again, we use the fall growth assessments and the winter with the state provided, again, to digest this, the students' progress and the new 9-week benchmark assessment as well. Excuse me, I'm stumbling over my words. The 9-week benchmark assessments. And, one thing that's really important too that we see when we look at those end of the year assessments we have to take is the language and the cognitive level that we find in the framework. And so we're placing a heavy stressor on the vocabulary, the verbiage that's in the SOLs, and making sure we're hitting it. Okay, next slide. Again, the academic review will be underway for this year with us. We do have intervention for math as well. That is the last 30 minutes of our math classes. We did increase our master schedule change this year. And so our classes are 85 minutes apiece. So 4 times a week, last 30 minutes, we will have our evidence-based program, which is called Dreambox. We've seen a lot of growth using that program over the last several years, so we are going to continue with that. Again, teacher goals are aligned to support our gap group needs, PD with our strategies, and then a process for providing specific feedback to our teachers on their written plans as well as the lesson delivery within the classroom. Next slide. Science. Okay, next slide. So for science, we have a different way of measuring progress, which is the MAP, the Measures of Academic Progress. That is administered in the fall and the spring, and our students took that last month. So our science teachers have already been looking at that information to help guide instruction and set goals for students. They also are completing a 9-week benchmark assessment, another tool to help them, and they also complete unit assessments with their normal teaching unit of units. Next slide. So again, you heard Mr. Kerpicki talk about this is where the state has given guidance this year that the biggest way that they're recommending we support in science is as much hands-on opportunities for learning that we can create. And it's nice in middle school because middle school does lead to a lot of labs, but we are extending those and amplifying them. We will use the diagnostic information from the MAP and the 9 weeks to create differentiated lessons to address our students' knowledge and skill gaps. Again, feedback coming from administration and instructional coach on alignment and cognitive levels. We would love to see the state give us some nice examples of practice items and things like that that are aligning now. Like practice problems, we used to have released SOL questions and stuff, and so we don't have those readily available from the state yet for all areas for math, science, English, history for our students to practice, but we can create those and mimic those ourselves. And then coaching feedback with our instructional coach. And then last is our history with a 56% pass rate. And you can go to the next slide. And for history, we do not have a universal screener, but the implementation of our new 9 weeks benchmark assessments will hopefully help us to digest a little more and move forward. And the last slide is so an adjustment of our pacing guides to ensure alignment with our master schedule change that we created. We've had different models at the middle school. We've had semester-based history and science, where one semester it's history, one semester it's science. We have had a model of every day all year long for just a shortened period of time. This year's it's an AB day schedule, and it is year-long. So they have science one day, and they have history the next, but they are 85-minute blocks. So they are longer blocks. So our teachers are adjusting their pacing guides to match that. We're going to focus on evidence-based instructional practices and strategies, and then find a way to provide great feedback to them to help them move forward with their lessons as well. And if you have any questions, I will gladly take them.
Questions from Ms. Wilson?
I have one question.
Sure.
Obviously, lots of variables, so comparisons are hard to do. But when you see a school that's got good scores, better scores, amid all your other responsibilities, are you able to have a chance, and you and your teachers sort of say, hey, what are the best practices that that school is doing that's making them do this well? Obviously,
sure.
It's difficult to compare, but is that something that we're able to do amidst all your other things you got to do?
Oh, sure. I mean, that's where it comes in greatly with collaboration when you do attend professional developments on our own as school leaders, and that time to collaborate and find out what other schools are doing, just connections from teaching in other counties. We find out about different approaches they're taking possible programs. We know there's nothing better than a teacher themselves. It's not the programs that fix things or, help students grow the best. But yeah, certainly that networking is enormous, and we do bounce ideas off of each other. I went to a state improvement meeting a couple weeks ago and made some great connections to some other schools. So we're always trying to foster that and bounce ideas that may be supportive. We look for schools, similar demographics, and sometimes even it's not the same. Sometimes you're a much larger division, but there's something great that can come out of that to support us as well. So yes, we're always seeking those things out.
I do have a question you may not have an answer to.
Okay.
As the students get older and they take more ownership into their own education, how do we share this information with them? And do they understand what they're going to have to do in order to get caught up?
Right, yeah. So very much so. So we do run, we run like incentive programs for kids where they do monitor, if they happen to be in one of our, what's the word I'm looking for? Intervention programs, right? With progress monitoring, we will do like competitions with that. So students are analyzed and they're looking at their data. They know where they grow. That's one of the nice things about some of our programs is that it does chart the data and the kids do see aim lines, they do see progress, and that is a discussion with their teachers. So they are talking about those things. Yes, and then just in classroom conferencing time, if they're in writing lessons, teachers conferencing with students about ways to improve. So it's the feedback piece, and that is another great, wonderful strategy here that we have is where we talk about the effect size of actual feedback and what that looks like with kids, and how that can actually be one of the greatest growth pieces in a student is providing feedback that is valuable and done correctly. So that students can grow. So that will be one of the practices that we're diving into is feedback.
Thank you.
Yep.
Anybody else? Thank you, Ms. Wilson.
Yep. Thank you so much.
Good evening again. I'm going to move this down so Harris doesn't come throw it in my face, but I do want you to hear me. So next slide, please. So this is just an overview of Madison County High School, and when I was sitting here listening to all the other principals, I think it's important to put into perspective that at the high school, you're going to see the pass rates, but this snapshot is not for all kids in my building. So there's only 11 end-of-course assessments that are given at the high school, but what happens at high school is you have to pass them to graduate. You have to pass your classes to graduate. You have to pass the tests to graduate. But we offer so many other courses, certifications, opportunities. Our dual enrollment classes don't have end-of-course assessment. So it's really a snippet of what our kids are doing at the minimum, right? Meeting the minimum requirement. But our goal at the high school is to increase the value of the high school diploma. And that's going to come from SOL scores, but it comes from so many other things, from their service learning opportunities, internships. And so tonight, I am presenting my school improvement plan, but this is just the specific parts for accountability for SOLs. We have other factors with it. I'm going to go through and show you each of our end-of-course assessment scores along with what we've done specifically for those areas. And the last slide is what we're doing overarching and things we've done already. So here's our reading and writing end-of-course assessments, and I put those comparable up there for you to see. Some things we have already incorporated this year that are new is the student growth assessments that are provided through our new curriculum at the high school, and it has been wonderful. So this is the first year we've been able to assess all of our students in our 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, and 12th grade classes, be able to get a reading level for them, know what Lexile score they read on, help them pick books in a reading level 100 above, 50 below, that they can continue to grow and teachers can scaffold material. It also has become a big part of our student intervention team meetings because we know which students are below grade level, what grade levels they're reading on, and where we need to get them. So that's been a huge help for us this year. So I'm hopeful that next year when we're here, our reading score will be above 82%. Writing is where you're going to see the dip, and that is, I'm going to go down to the 4th bullet because I sort of go as I talk, but We have a school-wide approach for writing fluency, and many of you know, students today, writing, we think of writing as writing, right? A physical movement. But writing is just the communication of ideas and expressing ourselves. And I think today kids actually do that more than they used to, except they do it in quick, short responses through text message, through tweets, through TikTok, whatever they use. They're communicating, but not in the formal way that we need them to do it where it's clear and appropriate. And so we have to work on writing more in every single class to help with fluency. There's two types of writing we focus on. One is writing to learn. So as we're listening to a teacher, we're taking notes. As we're observing an observation, we're taking notes. Or maybe I need to write in a paragraph why this chemical reaction happened and be able to explain it to someone with them be able to see it. So, but that has to happen across the school. It can't happen in isolation in English 11 class when that's when they take their first SOL. We have to start that in 9th grade, and that's what our goal is. Summer 2022 curriculum work, obviously that had to be done because we got a new textbook, but we really focused on building lesson plans that enabled our teachers to align the written, taught, and assessed curriculum. So all that is in alignment. We do have a great partnership with our school librarian for writing and research. This looks like small group instruction where she pulls out whole group instruction. I'm just going to give her a little shout out. Miss Wood actually is really working one-to-one with some of our seniors who are at risk for not graduating, pulling them, like they'll have a release block, but she pulls them during their release blocks, gives one-to-one remediation to help get through their graduation. This is not up here, but I am going to put it up there. But the beautiful thing of a small high school is we can list every student on a spreadsheet that took this SOL and really think about why they didn't. One thing that stood out to me with writing and discrepancy of gap groups, which isn't up here, is our male students performed about 25% lower than our female students in writing, not reading. And that's just something good information for our teachers to know because a lot of our male students are enrolled in agriculture and they're enrolled in building trades. And so what we have to work on is how do we get the reading and writing incorporated into those classes to help their fluency, and that I think that'll improve overall. So next slide. So here's our math. Our math is lower. Our math department is very strong, and these are, I think, reflected of learning loss. So these scores, 70% is low for us. Again, probably 10 to 15 percentage points lower than it has been in the past. However, we are seeing great gains in the math courses that are not assessed by the end of course assessment. All students are required to take the Algebra 1 test, all students. So if a student doesn't pass that Algebra 1 test, so think about a student taking Algebra 1 struggling, doesn't pass it. All the students that pass Algebra 1, when they go to geometry, they don't have to take the geometry test. Why? Because they've already passed Algebra 1. So what you're taking is that group of Algebra 1 students who maybe passed the class but didn't pass SOL, they now have to take the geometry SOL. So it's a snippet of your most struggling learners, really, when you get there. So that's where it's different with high school. So there's our data. We had wonderful summer 22 curriculum work. I was encouraged to see Mr. Kabricki's slide on the website where students at Waverly are using Desmos. That's a free online graphing calculator with awesome simulations. And I hyperlinked it, but please don't click it because they can go there on their own. And really worked on strong performance tasks. Performance tasks are like relevant, real world, not just your basic facts. Kids are going to have a calculator for the rest of their life. Like, we need to know, understand the why, and that's what we work with performance task 1. We do not have an instructional coach at the high school, but what we've been able to do, which I love doing and has been really excited to accomplish, is we've been creative with our master schedule and sectioning so that one of our teachers' assignments each semester, so it's only one section, is math, and intervention and instructional support. So one block, so we have a math teacher, pushes in, does small groups, helps our new teachers, helps with providing curriculum, anything and everything, data, remediation, and that's just been a really unique use of resources, and our teachers, our students are really benefiting this year specifically for that, because that's the first time we've done that with math. It also allows them to push over and support any students we have in alternative education. They're still our students. They still have to make progress, so it allows us to push and support there with math. Along with elementary school performance matter assessment training, we kickstarted that this year, so we've been working with our technology department and just a bore on getting those. Again, it makes the tests is more similar to what our students take, like the technology-enhanced items. It just allows that to be more meaningful. Special education, students with disabilities, you'll see this in every category, but I specifically put it in math. We have made a lot of progress with our students with disability, and the first thing that we do when they come to the high school is we look at their IEP and we look at alignment for the disability, so what is wrong, like what is their disability, and we make sure that their goals and services and that their least restricted environment is all aligned. So we want students with disabilities in classes with peers who are non-disabled. Why? Because it gives them models of good behavior, models of good academics. When we cohort them in small groups together, sometimes that lacks, and so they deserve that. But what our teachers can do, our teachers can move everywhere. So we have a really strong, you ask about push in and push out. So we have several service delivery options, but we really base it on what that student needs. So if they have a disability in math and it doesn't impact reading and writing, there's no need for them to be in a class with support for reading and writing in there. So we try to really work with their IEPs to make sure they're in the least restricted environment, but their expectations are still high for learning. And that's across the board, but I think we've done a really great job of that this year. Next slide. For our science end of course assessments, this was one of the content areas that we knew we were going to be performing the lowest in. And I think there's several reasons, but I'm excited for what we did this summer. So on August 8th, I think one of you just asked, Mr. Wingate, how do we connect with other divisions that are doing things well? So when you work in other places and you meet other people, it's great. So a really dear friend of mine, who I got to work with at a previous high school in a leadership role, is now the director of science curriculum in Manassas. And she came down for a whole day from 8:30 to 3:30 on August 8th, worked with my biology teachers, and we found where we messed up. Our curriculum, we weren't in alignment using the standards. They had new standards. They had shifted between the new standards and the old standards, and we still were assessing some of the old standards. So we fixed all of our units. So this year we're teaching with new course pacing, new unit organizers, really focused on not having an isolated unit on scientific investigation because it's tested all throughout. So instead of teaching scientific investigation, which they were teaching in one unit, they embedded it through every unit. So you're thinking like a scientist through every unit they're doing. Earth science curriculum work, we hired a national board certified earth science teacher who has brought amazing things to our school. I'm very grateful for her this year. She joined us from Chesapeake, but has been able to bring some awesome resources and increase the rigor in our earth science class. So we've seen that through grade books, through student learning. It's been a challenge for some kids because it's rigor, but it's been really great to see. One thing that we've started using, and we have a 45-day little trial right now going on, and then hopefully we'll purchase it, is Gizmos. And what it is online virtual labs that are created for the standards that are not interesting to students, that are hard to create a lab for in science class. The cool thing about this company is when I was talking to them, they're actually based out of Charlottesville, so they're able to come help us if we need to, and they work with surrounding divisions. And our students, it just has really brought a lot of life to our science department. Next. And last is our history end of course assessments. History a little bit above science, but not a lot. And here's where we have to get better in history, and here's where we are getting better. So often, what we don't want is students to be passive recipients of knowledge. They can look up anything on Google. They can Google the causes of World War II. They can Google anything and get the answer. But what we want them to be able to be is active experimenters with it, to be able to ask why, or think, how did that happen, or what could have prevented it. We want them to be able to think. So we're really working more in our history classes on building those. So not that direct instruction isn't great, because direct instruction does have a strong effect size in some capacity, but students really need to work with the content to understand it as well. So we're trying to move toward that collaborative process. We do have new standards coming out this year. So our unit and course organizers are being, as the year goes on, we're tweaking those for next year so that they're ready. One thing that is really important in history that sometimes I think we do get caught up into the storytelling part, the fun parts, and it gets exciting. But I think we need to scale back and really focus on content literacy strategies and content-specific vocabulary to make sure we're supporting those students who are struggling with reading. So that's for history. And history SOLs are World History 1, World History 2, and Virginia U.S. History. Next slide. And this is my final slide. So this is what we're doing all at Madison County High School. We have a student intervention team, which we meet basically every 4.5 weeks. We use PowerSchool to export student data for kids that are failing 2 or more classes. We meet, it's a multidisciplinary team. It's me, the assistant principal, all my school counselors, graduation coach, and special education team leader. In this spreadsheet is their reading, their Lexile scores, what level they read at, whether they have an IEP, a 504, what interventions have already been tried, and what our next steps are. It's how we identify kids that maybe need extra support. And it has been wonderful, and it helps us get ahead of the game when we're looking at kids' grade books. I will say we do focus on grading and the grade book at the high school, in that we have a common school-wide grading protocol and procedures for documenting student progress. We don't want, when a parent looks at a grade book, we want it to show learning, not show completion grades, like, oh, they filled out this worksheet 100%. Like, that's grading behavior. They did a worksheet, but we want it to be specific so that it's meaningful. And that's something that we do a lot. And during that student intervention team meeting, one of us is assigned to look at the grade book, attendance, tardies, behavior, everything. And we're able to see, hey, you may want to go talk to Ms. Wenham about a grade book. It looks like she's not putting zeros in, or it looks like there's a lot of participation grades. So that is like a check and balance for us, for teachers, instruction, and students. We do have research-validated instructional strategies. So we started with the course organizer this year. This is through the strategic instruction model. Our 95% of our classes have course organizers, which shows the mapping of the content in the order that it's taught, critical questions, all of that good stuff. So a parent can easily look at the front and back of that and have a good idea of what their kid's going to be learning and the progression. Right now, we have unit organizers, which break those course organizers down even more for English and mathematics. So we will begin social studies next year. The goal for that is to have all our core areas with unit organizers. But before students can learn, before students can be successful, we got to have an atmosphere that they can do that in. And that comes, from my opinion, with high expectations and also love, and also just a passion for teaching and learning. If you want to be in this job, I do think you have to have a love for kids. And if that's lacking, it's going to be hard to make progress. And that's one thing I'm really proud of at the high school. This year, we had to tighten down on the personal electronic devices. As you know, everybody has one. But also, it really has taken away from engaging with the content because it takes away from adult lives. I mean, it's going to take away from kids' lives. You hear a notification, you want to check your phone. I'm so proud of what we've done. We have had very many discipline referrals for personal electronic device, but last year we didn't have hardly one. So it's working. Students are turning in their phones. Some students have come in and say, hey, can I just turn my phone in and get it at lunch every day? And we have an organizer in the front office and we allow it because I think they're seeing that they can actually learn and do better when they're not distracted. So that's one thing we've done. Again, active experimenters, that's our theme, with knowledge, not passive recipients. We created this was from our leadership this summer. The leaders for all my departments met, and they had the idea of creating common entry and exit procedures for instructional blocks, which means when you walk into every class, you're greeted at the door by a teacher, you're acknowledged, you have a seat, you have a bell, some type of thing to begin class while attendance is taken. Students, the first 10 minutes and last 10 minutes of class, we don't let out in the hallway unless it is an emergency. We have Canvas pulled up to show what the students are learning. So those are just simple things that we decided as a school every student would get in every class. And again, the school-wide grading procedures. A benefit of the pandemic is it did offer some extra money for us to be innovative and think of ways to support students. And this is one thing that I hope we can keep forever, is the MCHS Academic Support Center. We started this our very first year of COVID, but it was in our cafeteria. So it was when we were on lockdown, but we allowed kids to come in and access the cafeteria and had teachers there who are willing to work with kids and just come in and get support. and they used it. We've continued it. It's grown. We are in the library now. We've reached out to 2 extra classrooms. It's a study hall setting. There's small group instruction, one-to-one tutoring. There's collaboration with peers. There's peer tutoring. We've used some restorative practices for if a kid's just like tardy and not coming to school, like they've, went there and maybe helped a peer or helped other kids. It's been really great for us. It's staffed Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday with teachers of all content areas, and we've just seen great attendance. Now we have the food program so kids can get their food and they get a snack and go, and that's been really great. What we'll do next is instruction. Our theme for the year is integrity, so doing what's right even when no one's looking. You guys may think that just applies to our students, but it applies to me. It applies to my staff. Being the best teacher, the best principal, best employee, even when no one's looking, and that's what we worked on at the beginning of the school year. So mid-year, we will have our instructional integrity mid-year review. We will look at what we said we were going to do, and we'll ask ourselves, have we been doing it? Can we do better? Maybe call some people out, like, hey, Ms. Wenham, I see cell phones in your room sometimes. But that's what's going to make us better if everybody believes in what we're working towards. So we have to have those conversations with each other. So we'll do that. We'll meet mid-year. We'll look at our test scores from first semester. My hopes is that they're better. If they're not, I promise you we're trying. Come see us. I welcome anyone to come into the school. I am proud of what we are doing. I just hope it does show improvement next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wenham. Questions for Ms. Wenham? Anybody?
How's my favorite English curriculum supporting the goals of improving reading and writing skills? Not the content I'm talking about, just how is it working out?
Okay. So, I talked about the Lexile score. That has been wonderful. It is a blessing to have a curriculum, number one. The stories that, we've eliminated, that has not been an issue. I feel like we've done a good job in navigating that. I do think that it has really provided some solidarity and common discussion among our teachers. They can plan together. And to be honest with you, I'm not sure what we would have done if you guys had not adopted a curriculum. I have 2 long-term English teachers right now that we've put in a great model, but this has given them stability. It's given them resources. It's given them lesson plans that are aligned to standards. And it's helped me as a principal be able to help them, because it would have been a lot on us if we had to go, and I wouldn't feel comfortable telling a substitute to just teach what you can find. So I like that I have something to hold them accountable to. So thank you.
And my other just a comment is just applaud you and your staff on the phones. When you first said that you're going to have a policy of letting them have it but not out, I really didn't think that was going to work. I thought we needed a more draconian thing of no, don't have your phones at all. But my child who's in school tells me, and other people told me how effective it's really been, and it's a testimony to really discipline and really forcing that, because it's a hard thing to break that addiction. And so it's awesome that that's happened. I think it's a really good news story.
It has to be collective, though. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that any classroom, if you come to my school tomorrow, you go in a classroom, you're going to see it. I think that's even at meetings with adults, people pull them out and look. But we're working in a much better direction, and I think kids are seeing the value of it, so thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wenham. Well, that was a lot of information. And congratulations and thank you to all the principals that are here tonight to share your plans with us. There's a lot of work going on, so thank you. Very nice. We reached the part of our meeting tonight where we will entertain public comment. I would ask you all, as you come forward, to please come up and state your first and last name and where you are from in the county. And you have 3 minutes to let us know what you think on a variety of topics of your interest.
I'm Annette Hyde, and I live in Radiant. I'm reading from the School Board Policy Manual on Public Complaints about Learning Resources, Option 1, that was revised on August 8th, 2022. The procedure for filing a complaint concerning learning resources is as follows. Number one, the complaint should be filed in writing with the principal on the request for reconsideration of learning resources form KLB-E. This form may be obtained from the principal or the central office. Number two, a review committee consisting of the principal, the library media specialist, the classroom teacher, if involved, a parent and/or student, and the complainant will convene. The responsibilities of the committee are to A, read, view, or listen to the challenge material. B, read several reviews if available. C, check standard selection aids. D, talk with persons who may be knowledgeable about the material in question and similar material. E, discuss the material. F, make a decision to recommend retaining or withdrawing the material. G, file the recommendation of the committee with the principal and the superintendent or superintendent's designee. H, notify the complainant of its recommendation and the disposition of the challenge material. Number 3, the complainant may appeal the decision to the superintendent or superintendent's designee and then to the school board. It seems that Mr. Wingate took it upon himself to violate this policy and preempt any committee in said policy, public comment, or board vote by directing the high school librarian to segregate 26 books he deems sexually explicit and required parental permission to check out. Mr. Wingate has had these books restricted for the entire high school population since September 6th. I find it fascinating that Mr. Wingate took the lead in writing a new policy based on what his definition of sexually explicit classifications are. If some parents want to restrict what their children check out from the high school library, there are procedures to do just that. But Mr. Wingate does not get to decide for all parents on what their children should read. By violating established policy, Mr. Wingate has set himself and the school system up for potential lawsuits.
Thank you.
Hello, good evening. I'm Pastor Jeff Light of Novum Baptist Church, and I want to say thank you so much to the board and to Superintendent Graham, to the principals, and to all the teachers and the staff for all that you've done. We've been hearing tonight, and we've known that this has been just a tremendously difficult time in our nation and certainly in our schools. And when we talk about a lot to work to do and the problems that we are facing, I think we all recognize that it's the students who are bearing the real burden of all of that. And so our hearts go out to you and our thanks. The comments about sharing love to the students from the staff here is just phenomenal, because that's what we really need to do. We need to help build one another up, these students up. In my 21 years of being pastor over at Novum, Madison's Novum Baptist Church, I don't think I've ever seen anything like we've had with regard to the sexually explicit materials that have been identified in like Loudoun County and Fairfax. And I don't know about you, but I was thinking that we'd be pretty safe out here in Madison, Rappahannock, Greene, and the various areas. The recent DOE requirement to ID and to notify is an important first step of the need to deal with this issue. And I think that it's good that we're going to be looking at removing those materials and excluding those materials that are found to be inappropriate, and I think that's great. What we need to do is use these scarce resources, our time and our people's talents and all of our efforts, to address those core areas of our education that our students really need, and we definitely don't need to distract them with things that are inappropriate or potentially damaging, as I think we could demonstrate through argument that some of these materials are to young people. What we want to do, I think, is apply a policy against our vision, whatever that might be. I'm not sure what the vision is here, but I imagine it's something to educate all children to succeed in life, to fulfill their full potential, teaching, learning, and caring, and to make sure that we're doing that for the well-being of all students. I just urge you to do that which is sensible, which is appropriate, to eliminate that which, and these students have enough on their backs and on their shoulders to deal with those things that are inappropriate, those things that are damaging, those things that listen, it's common sense. We know the difference between describing a situation and pornographic sexual acts, and those things don't belong in our schools. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Angela Eichelberger. I live in Madison County, and I have just a couple points I wanted to make. The first one pertains to the library books. On September 6th, as you know, several books were removed from shelves and restricted for students. Most of the books that were removed have been in the library for several years, some of them since 2002, so 20 years. When a member of the community has a concern about the books, you have a policy to address these complaints, which someone has already read, policy KLB. That policy has been in place since 1999. For the entire time these books have been in the library. I assume you've read the policy because you just passed a revision of it in August. The current restriction did not follow the policy. There was no formal request nor a review. So there is a reason, and there is a reason for this policy. If we simply remove books every time someone has a complaint or is offended by something, we're likely to have very few books in the library for our students. I don't know how that is going to support learning or reading. So I think these books have been improperly restricted. You haven't followed the policy, and they should be returned to the shelves immediately with no restrictions unless a parent specifically requests one for their child. Now, if a challenge is made to these books properly through this policy, those books should remain accessible to students while they are under review until a decision is made. My second point is pertaining to the draft policy on instructional materials. I support the model policy that was released by the state earlier this year, which would inform parents and give them more choices. However, your draft policy differs from that model policy in two major ways. One, it's not a parental choice policy. It is your choice policy to remove content that you deem inappropriate, and you have significantly changed the definition of sexually explicit from what the model policy the state has put out. And so I think what is going to happen is you are going to catch a very wide net of books and other materials that I don't think really want to eliminate from your curriculum. So I ask that you pass the state's model policy instead of this draft policy that you've put together. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Devlin, and I live in Radiant. You have repeatedly stated that you want parental input, so I'm here as a parent with 2 kids in the school system to give you my input. I do not feel that the books listed fit the description of explicit. I would be interested to know if you, Mr. Wingate in particular, have actually read any of these books in their entirety. From your statements on the subject, it appears that you have not. You are simply regurgitating the agenda of an outside political group rather than the concerns of actual Madison County parents. While I agree that some of these books have scenes that are difficult to read and some have mild romance, these books have merit beyond that. Difficult topics as well as stories of vivid imagination are in these books, and they should be available to our kids. Having personally read the majority of the books on this list, I can honestly say that I would have no problem with my girls reading them in high school. I find it interesting that you would single out books for scenes involving sexual encounters, yet have no apparent problem with Mein Kampf being in circulation without restriction. Evidently, discussion of sexual encounters is going to endanger young minds, but a racist, xenophobic diatribe written by a mass murderer is harmless? If we want to discuss removing books, we need to discuss why we are removing them first. To me, there are plenty of reasons to remove Mein Kampf. Millions of innocent people died because of the disgusting ideas and beliefs within that book. Because let's face it, ideas are what you are afraid of here. Ideas that may cause children to question the belief system that their parents want them to conform to. If it's explicit language you are trying to protect them from, good luck, because kids hear more lewd and graphic language from their peers and the internet than you'll ever find in these books. I contest that we should adopt the model policies as written by the Virginia Department of Education. The policy is clearly stated and does not infringe upon the freedoms of kids to choose what they read. The wording in your proposal is vague and leaves too much room for interpretation. In Part 3, Section C, you place the school board in the position to have the final say on book segregation or removal. This policy reads more like a power grab than an effort to protect children or provide parental controls. There are already parental controls in place in the form of an opt-out program, as well as an organized review policy that involves a curriculum review committee rather than the school board. Parents already have the rights you say you want them to have. What you are reaching for is beyond that. You do not speak for all parents. If you don't want your kids reading these books, use the policies in place, just like any other parent has the right to do. But do not decide for me what you think my kids should read. That is for me as a parent to decide.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Devin Barton, and I am a student here in Madison County. And I would just like to say that I have not been asked my opinion on this entire matter. None of the students here have been asked their opinion on what they feel is actually quote-unquote dangerous or harmful to them. None of the students here are free enough to actually worry about these so-called problems that you are all discussing here. The students are more occupied with learning the curriculum and with learning all the other things that are set before them. The students have not ever been asked what their real opinion is, and that needs to be fixed. That is all. Thank you.
Could you catch his name? Devin. Thank you.
I'm
Yes,
Eleanor
ma'am.
Montgomery, and I live in Malvern. Madison Cares, along with the support of Madison's American Legion Auxiliary, sponsored the Constitution Day Art Project, which was open to all children in the county, grades K through 12. The students were asked to draw an 8.5 by 11-inch picture about the Constitution. For years, the contest has been offered by the Goat Art Committee, a division of the American Library Association. And in 2013, out of 30,000 contestants, Patrick Corbin, a 12th grader from Madison County, won. We were thrilled this year that over 400 Madison students participated in this contest and thank the administration and the teachers who made it available. We have some very talented Madison students. On Constitution Day, September 20th, I went to all Madison County schools to pick up the entries. At every school, the friendly front office staff treated me with courtesy. They actually seemed happy to see me. For visitors, the office staff sets the tone for the school. How fortunate Madison County schools are to have such pleasant and helpful personnel. The front office staffs are to be commended, and we thank everyone in the school system for their help with the Constitution Day Art Project. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Mike Sharman from the Novum area in Madison. I'm on my 39th year as being an attorney. 35 of those have been working with children who are abused, neglected, raped, molested. Right now my practice is about half suing child molesters and the entities that assist them. I sue sheriff's departments, schools, churches, little leagues. Wherever kids are, there are people that are going to take advantage of that. So I'm familiar with the civil code and a criminal code on that, you notice the first thing I put out is what's known as contributing to delinquency. So it has any person, 18 years of age or older, including the parent of any child, who willfully contributes to or encourages or causes any act, omission, or condition that renders the child delinquent, or in need of services, or in need of supervision, or abused and neglected, is guilty of a Class 1 misdemeanor. How do molesters, or just sexual opportunists, because many molesters aren't pedophiles, they're just opportunistic. How do they get a child to go along with the action or keep quiet about it if it was against the child's act? It's called grooming. Who've been sexually abused. You notice the two that I've highlighted here that are common is desensitization to touch and discussion of sexual issues. Abusers may also show the victim pornography or discuss sexual topics with them to introduce the idea of sexual conduct. And rarely will the groomer start with pornography. They'll start with chatting about it. They'll start with bringing it up. And then you'll notice the next one is attempts by abusers to make their behavior seem natural. And then the next one says the same thing. Common sense should be common, but it's not. Common sense, you don't intentionally present sexually explicit material to a minor. That's just basic. The next common thing is you don't use taxpayer money to do it. If moms want to present that to their children, well, then they have that contributing to delinquency statute to deal with. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lisa Davis from Locust Dale. In reference to some of the restricted assets of approximately 26 books from the high school library, I have personally read several and admit the range to me is remove/restrict access to some to why are these even being restricted?
Ms. Davis, would you mind speaking up a little bit, please?
That's them.
Oh, it was a thumbs up? I thought you meant turn it up. Okay. All right.
Okay, credit me some time here then.
Okay, thank you.
I agree the ones I have read all have sexual content, but how much and how descriptive varies. I read several asking myself would I want a 14-year-old to be able to read it. So with that said, I agree with the board that for their immediate action to restrict, not ban, but restrict to the questionable books was right as an interim until a formal policy was made and trying to follow the established protocols. I request the board to list the books in question on their webpage and advertise them to include high school's main page. Parents and taxpayers need to know about them and where to access them to make up their own mind on appropriateness. Also to be able to comment on any policy to be made before it's voted on. I watched your September workshop video and knew whom to ask, but this needs to be made public with easy access. I justified this as of last Friday when I had the pleasure of meeting the high school principal while reviewing some books in the library, and she commented that I had been the only person who was asked to see them. That is not good. Get the word out. I also do not necessarily concur with the board member comment at the last workshop, if in fact it's true, that, quote, if it is in the library, it is structural material that is available for students, end quote. I would say not necessary for all books, because they are not all structural material. They are to meet pupils' needs, interests, and abilities and encourage reading for pleasure. I also had the pleasure of meeting the new librarian, whom I was impressed with. Not just her professional skills, but how she treated all students, and especially one-on-one interaction with a girl that needed some sort of help with a science project or a report. Not once did she do any work on the report, but continually gave suggestions or reworded the question in a way that the student could better understand it. She spent a considerable time with her, and she was still there when I left. Finally, I want to thank the school superintendents and principals who supported the Constitution Day contest with awards forthcoming. In my last 26 seconds, as a taxpayer, I do have a say in the buying of books. And I would encourage anybody that has not gone to the library or have read the books completely that they need to do so before they comment on them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm not here to talk about the books in the library, although I would like to go for record and say that I would never stand here and endorse pornographic, explicit, sexually explicit material in our libraries for K through 12, anywhere across. But I would like to put a plug in for the Nicholas Sparks books that do enjoy a good emotional love story. So if you guys could keep those in the library, that'd be great. But no, what I'm here to, my name's Graham Davidson. I'm from Brightwood. I have 4 children in the public school system. I'm active military. We moved here 2 years ago, and before then, we had moved 5 times in 6 years. So my 4th grader had been to 5 different schools. And one thing that we've noticed from one school system to the next is the power of encouragement. From the school teachers, from the system, from the community, from the teachers and parents, you know, a concerted effort to encourage our students to do well. And there's a lot of research out there about reading self-efficacy for children, about self-efficacy in mathematics, in science and others, and how the motivation is a big part of the calculus in them for academic achievement. And I just want to, you know, the principals were up here speaking. We looked at statistics. We looked at action plans. The principal from the high school actually started to hit on this idea of encouraging students. You know, standing there at the door as they walk in the classrooms. That's just a very small example of what a school system might do. But I want to encourage all of the schools to focus on building children's character, encouraging them to do so. Focus on, you know, helping our teachers understand how to have character self-efficacy, and their ability to role model and encourage and enforce good behavior in the classroom. And if we make those things a part of our action plans, I think that our SOL scores will start going up. I think that if we start to take that area serious, this idea of building up our students to respect themselves and respect the work they do, then those types of things, focusing in those areas will help student scores. You know, I'm in a PhD program right now in higher education and strategic leadership, and one of the big things we talk about is the power of motivation, the power of encouragement. So I just want to share that with the class. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
This thing's monstrous. Good evening, I'm Kim Smith. I'm a resident of Brightwood. And I want to compliment the board on what appears to be an attempt to give better definition to the mechanism of access to books in the school library. I am not here to talk about censorship. I'm not talking about banning. I'm talking more about the parent's role. We live in a world of limitations. For Christians, it's the Bible. For Jews, it's the Torah. For Muslims, it's the Quran, and it goes on in the religious kingdom. As Americans, we have the U.S. Constitution and the rulings that emanate therefrom. We have the congressional laws and the interpretation of the agencies in the form of regulations. The FCC would not allow you to continue broadcasting if some of this stuff were read to the public. We have state laws, and regulations that limit all of us. We have local rules and ordinances. And then we come into the room with the school. And we have school rules, we have classroom rules, we have playground rules. These are expectations of behaviors that we want to encourage so that we all live in a healthy, civilized, safe society. But and even our organizations, I think of the organizations I belong to, they have rules, do's and don'ts. It's part of life. Going back to the state constitution and the laws of the Commonwealth, there are very strict instructions that parents have the ultimate role in the rearing and education and well-being of their children. What is appropriate for a child often depends upon a parent's perspective. And it would be my hope that you would have a policy to support parents wherever they fall on the spectrum. The ultimate goal should be nurturing children who can become successful citizens to carry onward in a civilized world. I wish to close my remarks with an admonition, of course, with two short items that appeared in social media. Real short. Oops, you don't get to hear them. Thank you.
Thank you.
This thing's a lot taller than me. Good evening. I didn't plan to, I'm Isha Jones. I have 2 kids in Madison County. Didn't plan to speak, but told my daughter I'd speak on her behalf. She's an 11th grader in the high school. And so we sit here another month, a year later, with no action plans of what we're actually going to do to help our children succeed, but more so of what are we going to do to help us with our own egos. Tonight's data showed that we have huge disparities and we have huge gaps that we need to address. And this board continues to do nothing to address those gaps, but to create policies that will help your own egos. Thank you, Devin, for speaking up. Thank you to my kid who will get her driver's license at the age of 16 for wanting to speak up, because those are the kids that are driving and can kill themselves that way that you say are unable to make the decisions on whether they can pick a book that would not upset their parents. We got to do better. We need to do better. Thank you for our educators and our administrators who show up every day knowing that we have those gaps, but they continue to show up for our kids. And to close, there was no questions from this board. You could have asked, what can I do to help support you? What do you need? We're here to help you. But instead, nothing. And that's what we've gotten over the last year. We've got to do better. We need better if we want our kids to be better.
Thank you.
Hello. I want to start by introducing myself to the board and the Madison County community. My name is Charlotte Shiflett Wood. I have been a high school teacher for 26 years, and this is my first year as the library media specialist at Madison County High School. The students of Madison County High School are already endeared to my heart, and it is on behalf of them that I speak to you today about established board policies and how library materials are selected. In the September 28th article by Becky Thompson titled "Book Banning Begins in Madison," published in the Mad Rap Recorder, school board member Charlie Sheeds Jr. stated, "It is not that we don't trust the teachers, we don't trust the librarians. Librarians are teachers and media specialists, technology integrators, information specialists, and instructional partners. Librarians support literacy. It was on day 15 of working with students that I was instructed to begin pulling books from the shelves at the request of Superintendent Graham, per the request of Mr. Wingate. Compiling a list of titles with engaging content to help improve our student literacy rates was no longer my priority. I didn't know the collection yet and wasn't even aware if our library had these particular titles. Libraries support intellectual freedom and choice, the freedom to choose to read a book or not read a book. Writing, just like all art, is subjective, and so are views when it comes to content. What a parent wishes their child to read or not read should be a discussion between a parent and their child. Some people may say, get rid of all books. Kids can just go to the public library. Not all children have transportation or family members available to them during the hours the public library is open. This then becomes a matter of equal access. Books are selected on literary merit as a whole, not on a brief passage contained within. School libraries often purchase books through library vendors who compile lists that have been vetted as age appropriate for the school. The books are then reviewed by professional library journals. If books are purchased or donated individually, I then search for at least 3 professional library reviews as well. Just as the cafeteria system can add a note from a parent regarding a child's dietary restrictions, so too can the librarian add titles to the student's name in the Destiny catalog. So when a student attempts to check out a title the parent doesn't want them to read, the librarian will see it. It's an easy solution used by many schools and one I presented to Mr. Wingate at the librarian meeting on September 12th. Madison County already has an established reconsideration of materials policy. This is a policy used by districts across the nation when a parent objects to a particular title and requests its removal. This reconsideration policy is available online and can be found in the Madison County School Board Policy Manual as KLB and KLBE. According to records, it was adopted by this board in January '99 and recently revised and approved just 2 months ago on August 8th of this year. Thank you.
Thank you.
I am Jean Vesposo from Locust Dale. I am very concerned about the direction that this board is going. I do not feel that you're supporting your teachers enough. I think you expect too much of them. I heard a comment about a teacher gave a child a book and she took it home. Instead of blaming the child, you blame the teacher. If the child did not want to take the book home, she would not have taken it, but you blame the teacher. I am very much concerned about what's happening in our teachers. I just read in the paper where one school system is having to hire teachers from the Philippines because they don't have enough teachers. You're going to hire veterans. My husband is a veteran. He's also worked for NASA. I would put him in a schoolroom. So you've got to have people who are qualified. But you seem to be going in a direction that I do not understand. I think one of the most important things is you want children to read. When I was growing up, I did not have a library. There was no library. I lived in Madison County. There's no library to go to. I became a librarian because I believe in reading. I helped with the reading school, with the reading in the elementary school here before COVID came. I went every week to help listen to a child read in order to encourage them to read. So I don't know, I want to ask you, how many of you have really read these books that you say are harmful? Have you really read them, or you just taking excerpts from it? I would like to give you, I'll give you the chapter, the verse, and the book from the Bible that maybe you should not read either. You want to read Genesis 19, 30 to 38. You want to read Samuel 13, 1 to 19. Ezekiel 22, 10 to 11. Judges 19, 23 to 29. These are things that are not very nice that are in the Bible. They involve rape, incest, and murder. Do you want to ban the Bible? I hope not. But if you're going to take excerpts, then you need to look at the whole content. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Matt Hooser from Madison County. I brought a couple books up here. I agree. Somebody said there's a lot of ego thumping or whatever going on today. I'd agree with that, but I think it's from a lot of people in this room. I got a couple books here. I think were great books when I read them. I learned a lot from them. They're full of nothing but knowledge, right? One is the Ranger Handbook. You can learn anything in this book from being a leader, planning, organizing, how to survive, how to make improvised weapons to kill men, how to plug fingers and holes in bodies that or stuff a man's guts back in his body. I'm pretty sure that some of you parents don't want your kids reading this book because you don't want them to be a soldier, right? But you would kick this book out of your library versus giving another kid an opportunity to read something else. Now, I'm on the page of you want to let kid read a book, maybe have the discussion with the parents, let the parents decide, right? That's where I'm at. But don't sit here and say you want certain material to be in a school or a school library that you won't have other material. I mean, there's a lot of hypocrisy in this room right now, and it's just a little aggravating to me. You want a kid to read a book and learn something? I'm all for that, because that's what books are for, to educate you. If you're going to keep certain resources out of the library, but definitely push some resources that are definitely inappropriate. I think there's a line somewhere in this conversation that we could all say is probably not appropriate to have. There's certain conversations, and I said this to somebody today, I as an adult male, I wouldn't have with an adult female unless she was comfortable with it. But for children, you definitely don't cross that threshold. So I'm a little irritated, I apologize. When I come in there these meetings, I try to keep cool and calm and collected, but I sit here and listen to all these parents say, I want this book or I don't want this book. But you all know that there's a line in the sand with your child specifically that you would not let them learn about a certain material that you feel uncomfortable with or you think they shouldn't learn. So I think as adults, we should all kind of put our differences aside and come together and say, there is a process in which we can allow kids to look at material, whether it's with our permission or some other way, but there is a method we can come together instead of sitting here bickering about whether a book should be in the library or shouldn't be in the library. I say if you want to have books in the library and you don't want the kid to read it, then have the parent make that decision. That's their job as a parent, to protect their children. If it's pornographic in nature, well, I'd recommend everybody look at the Liberties with a Minor. That specifically covers a lot of the stuff that talks about some of these books. And yes, I've read some of these books, and they were very pornographic in nature.
Thank you.
I'm Larry Thomas. I'm from Wolftown. Thanks for the opportunity to speak. I'd also like to express my appreciation for the principals and the content that they offered us. It shows that they've dedicated themselves to a whole lot of work. I have over a decade of experience in the fields of education, development, psychology. I have a master's degree and a doctorate in foundations of education and educational psychology. I won't go into the details, but I've written a course, published articles, taught developmental psychology at the college level, and AP psychology at Woodbury Forest. I also started the Madison Victim Witness Program, where I worked with juvenile and adult victims of sexual abuse. I've read excerpts from several of the books that are being questioned by Mr. Wingate, and there are a few questions I'd like answered. What are the criteria for including books in the school libraries? What educational objectives are served by this list of books? What would the ratings be of movies that included the scenes that are described vividly in these books? Who selected them and why? What justifications are there for retaining these books? They contain, in vivid, graphic detail, rape, gang rape, incest, voyeurism, pedophilia, oral sex, carnal knowledge, sadomasochism, prostitution. To sum up, sexual abuse, much of which is illegal or criminal activity. They do not contain illustrations or descriptions of love, much less respect or healthy relationships, a discussion of birth control, cautions regarding the risks of contracting STDs and HIV. This writing style is designed for one purpose only: sexual arousal and consent to act on it. These books convey a callous and reckless worldview, as well as the objectification of women or girls. They do not nurture healthy social, emotional growth. How do you reconcile these books with Character Strong? How do we intend to teach children to recognize and avoid inappropriate touching if we furnish books that support it? Children look to teachers, librarians, and parents for trustworthy guidance. How do these books send that message to them? In the course of identity development, adolescents naturally challenge the mores and boundaries of adult society. What taboos do they have left to challenge? If the adult community fails to draw boundaries for acceptable behavior, adolescents, oh, it's a shame, you're going to miss the best part.
Thank you.
I strongly recommend that without reservation, you do censor and ban these books because they're not appropriate for young people.
Thank you.
Okay, sorry.
Hi, I'm Charlie Landgraf. I'm a resident of Etland, Virginia, in Madison County. Thank you first to the principals, to the superintendent administrators, and above all to the librarian for their presentation today. I've never known a librarian that wasn't a saint, by the way. I agree with the pastor who said you don't need distractions. Totally agree with that, given the challenges that you've heard with the test scores and indeed the disparities that Mchs Jones highlighted for you. But a book on a library shelf that is unread is not a distraction. What is a distraction is the constant efforts, incessant efforts to ban those books without any rational discussion of their content and the overall literary value of the works. You've heard from several speakers tonight about the proper process for review of books if there's a complaint against a book, and it appears that that process was not followed. You really must follow that process. The danger of not following that process, and by the way, a parent that objects to any of those books can restrict access to those books to their children, as the librarian explained, with the Destiny system. The Destiny system is a wonderful piece of technology. There's no risk to your child if you want to identify a book. But the literary value that would be deprived of the rest of the population and the rest of the school is what is really central here. And the danger of departing from the review process, which is adopted and has been a binding requirement of this school district since 1999, I would like to give one concrete example of the danger of departing from that review process. At your recent work session, a document was circulated to the board that purported to describe those sexually explicit passages in 5 books. I just heard the previous speaker say that none of these books describe sexual content that is a loving relationship. That is simply untrue. Let me give one example. The document that you got is inaccurate. It's inaccurate in multiple ways, but I only have time for one example from snow falling on a cedar. It stitches together 3 sentences in one part of the book with 3 sentences in another part of the book, 200 pages away. And in the second passage, even one sentence is lacking 29 words from the copy in the book.
Thank you.
They're simply inaccurate.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Carol Shari. I'm from Madison. I am also really, Carol Shirey. Can we spell it? Okay. I'm also really concerned that your own policy wasn't followed. I think it sets a really bad example for our students. I'm once again trying to substitute teach. I once again struggle with this. And the last thing we need to do is show examples of not following guidelines we put down for ourselves that we've agreed to. I'm also real concerned that, especially Mr. Wingate, when you ran for the board, I think I actually wrote this to get it right. You said, we must stop policies that undermine parental authority. What you're doing is undermining parental authority. You're making the decision for other parents. I think we already have a system in place that allows any parent to easily opt out of their child reading any of these books. But to make that decision for other parents, I don't think is what your goal should be. It should be every parent's right. And these weren't picked out because they're pornographic. I respect teachers and librarians who recommend books that are age appropriate. Do some of these excerpts make me uncomfortable? Yes, they do. But that's me. That doesn't mean that every student will be inappropriate, will find it, well, I think a lot of them will still find it uncomfortable, but I don't think they will be so affected that it undoes the good some of these books teach. A lot of these books teach empathy. If you don't learn empathy for people that you are not otherwise exposed to, you don't get compassion. If you don't get compassion, then our world is going to be a lot worse than it is today. I think we need to step back, realize that what we're supposed to be doing, I would think, is supporting our teachers, our librarians, all the people who are working so hard at something they chose as a profession. We need to support them, not question everything they do, and follow what processes are already in place instead of wasting time on things that really we shouldn't be fighting about, in my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Mark Oots from Aroda. I would like to express my admiration for the board for taking on these policies, for the educational and library materials that are in our schools. I do think it's important that we protect our children above all. I am reminded some of my experiences, even today. One of my favorite places to go is Barnes & Noble when my wife goes shopping, and I can read an entire book and never buy it. And you can do that in a library. You never have to check anything out. Just go read. It's wonderful, and it's free. But I do think it is very important that we have policies that we're working on to protect the kids and protect their minds. As a community, As a school, as a society, that's our duty. The bare minimum, we should protect the kids. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Brian Glade. I'm from Madison. Been here about 11 years. I want to just first...
May I get your last name again?
Glade, like the air freshener. I want to express support for what's been said about the board's overreach. It's been very clear that the policy hasn't been followed. Decisions were made unilaterally without consultation according to the policy. So I just first want to state that. My profession is executive recruiting. And one of the first things I do when I'm looking for candidates for a position, mostly CEO positions, is look at the job description. I know that one of the board members said he never looked at the job description. He didn't need to see the job description. But the job description for a school board member is pretty clear. Approve a strategic plan, set data-driven expectations and goals, evaluate performance, take necessary action to meet student needs. One important one here, promote high levels of student achievement. We sat through amazing presentations, and I want to compliment our school principals for all the work that they've done. And having had a student in the school, I know it's not an easy job to be a teacher. My mom was a teacher. They do great work every day. Are we performing according to standards? No. Are there plans to address those deficiencies? Apparently, yes. How much time has the board spent in reviewing those plans? I agree with Misha. How much time has been spent? What's the progress to date? What are the metrics that you have to show success for your performance as school board members? I challenge you, Mr. Wingate, spend as much time developing a plan rather than saying we should be thinking creatively. Well, you should be thinking creatively, not looking at books that you haven't read and you want to ban from our library. What have you done as a school board to address these deficiencies in our school's performance, in our students' learning? I'd like to see a report on that, given as much attention as all that's been given to taking down a flag in the library, to addressing trans policies, to making sure LGBT students are not supported. I'd like to see all that you're doing for students besides these unnecessary distractions, those issues that you're spending so much time on, rather than dealing with what's been presented tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Chris Coggins of Madison. I felt the need to speak tonight because I'm troubled by the actions of the school board. While you've been debating transgender issues, curriculum, and now banning books, as a former educator, I'm puzzled as to why you're exerting so much energy going after false narratives that until now were never a problem in our community. And while I could join others in defending the LGBT community, our youth in the schools, or arguing against the ridiculous suggestion that our Madison teachers are secretly plotting to indoctrinate our children and now exposing our children to sexually explicit material and language, I feel my energy should be spent telling the school board to refocus on our students and not bullet points lifted from religious and political groups. Unlike most of you, I've been in the classroom, so it's important to understand what goes on day to day in for our Madison teachers. I can honestly say in my years in the classroom, I've yet to overhear a teacher indoctrinating their students. And you too would know this if you volunteered, attended PTO meetings at your child's school, or volunteered to help a student struggling to improve their STEM skills. If we were doing what truly matters for our students, our schools would be overflowing with participation by board members, community partners, and parents participating in field trips, monitoring assignments each night at home, and better supporting students that fall through gaps. Our schools would not have the shortages they currently face. But instead, this school board seems to only be focused on creating fictitious boogeymen and keeping our community up in arms at every turn. If we're honest, the only thing a school board member truly invested in every child should be saying is how do we ensure these LGBT students are safe, supported, and protected from bullying? If we're honest, the teachers in this county reflect the political breakdown that we find in this community. So the attacks you lead, questioning their integrity and qualifications to evaluate supplemental readings that weren't being used in the first place, really seems to just be a distraction. And now this, banning books that no one was reading from the shelves of the library to begin with. I'm frustrated. I'm frustrated that individuals on this school board's political agendas seem to tear at the fabric of our community constantly. If you want to help our schools as school board members, stop chasing fictitious problems. Put your energies in getting school supplies. Look at the disparities in test scores between white, Black, and Latino students and other minorities. Start improving those test scores, increase parent involvement, building technology and STEMs engineering programs or STEMs programs in the schools, as we're currently very far behind other countries in these areas. But stop bringing your own political agendas and chasing problems that rank low in comparison to more pressing matters. Our community deserves much better than what you're currently doing.
Thank you.
Hi, y'all. I'm Katie Peacock. I'm a senior at Madison County High School. I don't know how much you guys have read of those books, but I actually read a few for school. I was told to read them on the curriculum. Mind you, I didn't go to Madison all 4 years, but I was told to read them. Lewis Dye, I read that. Perks of Being a Wallflower, one of my favorites. It's actually a great book. Coming from someone who has a sexual abuse in the past, some of those books were actually really comforting in a weird way, to know that I wasn't alone and to know that other people had similar thoughts to me going through things like that. And it was honestly comforting to find those in my libraries and to be told to read them by teachers and to be able to talk about them in classrooms. And even though no one's asking you to have people talk about them in classrooms, it was nice to see them in the library. And it's kind of sad to see them go because a lot of those are great. I don't know how many of you guys have read The Handmaid's Tale, but that's a beautiful piece of literature that you're trying to get rid of. And I'm really disappointed by that. I actually want to be a teacher. I want to be a middle school math teacher, but for a while I kind of talked about trying to be an English teacher for middle school, but knowing that I probably in the future won't be able to share all the literature that I want to share kind of makes me teeter towards math, which is fine because I love math, but it's disappointing because once again we have a teacher shortage and you're kind of making it harder for people to want to teach. So, yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to come forward?
Good evening. I'm Pastor Russell Weinber, Oak Park Road Baptist Church, 13-year resident of Brightwood. And I do want to say I do appreciate all the effort that's put in by the school board, the educators, administration, and I am greatly appreciative of that and glad to be getting a little more involved in the process. The Word of God says that blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord, but sin is a reproach to any people. Our responsibility before God does not change with what is popular. Our responsibility to God as educators, I, in a way, am one myself as a pastor. We are responsible to God for what we teach, what we allow being taught. And I want to say thank you to the school board members and the administration for taking the lead on what is right, not necessarily what is popular. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to come forward with a an idea or a comment? This will close down the public comment part of our meeting tonight. And we would just like to thank all of you for taking your time to attend our meeting, but also to come forward and express your opinions as well. The next section of our meeting is the business information. And during business information, we simply bring forward policies, ideas, and information to share with everyone. At this point, these are ideas. They are not to be voted on tonight. We're just letting everybody know. So the first one that we have is to update our policy regulation. And I know that you may not have read this one, but this one has to do with our policy GCE-R. And if you'd like to explain it, that's fine, or I can, either one.
Either way, I can be very quick. This
Okay.
was just a regulation, and we just needed to update it when we raised substitute pay from $100 to $110 per day. We needed to go back in the regulation and make that correction. So this is just to correct that. So that's all. Long-term subs, I need.
This
to
is
make
just
sure.
making sure that our policy is in line with what our procedure is.
For long-term substitutes, make sure I put that in there.
The next one for business approval has to do with our, I'm sorry. Thank you. Getting ahead of myself. The next one under business information has to do with policy BDB, special meetings, and that was a policy that was brought forth by Mr. Sheeds and Mr. Wingate. Mr. Sheeds, would you like to say anything about that, or?
Well, what I had Commonwealth Law Offices take a look and reorganize this in a way that was more appropriate, and they also added in, Ms. Faulkner had a question as far as when the special meeting was called. Was the chair at one of the included as a board member, or did it require 3 board members and then the chair? So that's been clarified in here. The policy's been reorganized in such a way that everything's there. It's the same. Nothing's been added or retracted. But because it's not the same as it was at the last meeting, I think we have to wait for the public to look at it for another month before we vote.
That was our decision that we made this afternoon, so we'll bring it forth next month for a vote. Thank you, Mr. Sheeds. The next part of business information has to do with what we had discussed, excuse me, what we had discussed 2 weeks ago, which is that our governor has requested and mandated that we have a policy to him by January the 1st having to do with sexually explicit instructional materials. 2 weeks ago, we got together and discussed what that would look like and how far we would deviate from what his sample policy was. He did not say that we could not, but he also gave us a lot of guidance into what it would look like. So at this point, I think at this point there has been a draft, but the draft is, it's kind of in raw form, put it that way, because the policy that the governor gave us has been added to by Mr. Wingate, and I don't think that anybody else on the board has commented on the policy. So it is in, it's in discussion right now because we all want an opportunity to do that, and it's been passed through quite a few lawyers. So I'm not sure our lawyer needs to see this. And I guess that's something we would need to discuss among ourselves as well. But that's just there for anyone to discuss tonight, or I guess maybe all of us need to make a comment. I think one of the comments that I made, and you may have read it in the paper, was that this policy cannot be Chris's policy. It has to be the governor's policy. And it has to be one that all of us agree that this is the form that we want the policy to be presented to him in. And to my knowledge, none of the rest of us have had an opportunity to comment on that. So, or we haven't. Mr. Wingate, did you want to add anything? Or that's what my thinking is right now.
So the chairwoman is certainly correct. This is this kind of first step, the first step in the process. I would disagree with your characterization. This should not be the governor's policy. It should not be my policy. All it's true. It should be the Madison County School Board's policy. So it's not the governor's policy. So because I think it is founded upon the DOE model policy, but and it meets those requirements. But that policy says that we can deviate from that, and so I think we have the right to do that. And so I disagree that it's not the governor's policy, but our school board's policy.
The governor's request that we have this policy.
Right. So the draft is the first step, and I expect it should and will be strengthened by all the school board. Just to lay out the highlights of it, as the governor's model policy requires, it requires the school to establish a process for identifying instructional materials with sexually explicit content. And as this board agreed upon, that does not include library books in this policy. There'll be a separate draft that we'll figure out, but this is only about instructional materials that are used in curriculum. And then so it's very similar to the model policy through that point of identifying sexually explicit content. The way it's now strengthened, that we strengthen it so that to empower parents and protect children is to say there's just no good reason for there to be sexually explicit content in curriculum that every child has to take part in. And so what this draft policy says is that, with a few exceptions that I can talk about, is that explicit content, sexually explicit content, which we define in the policy as a draft, will not be allowed in the school. And I think there's a lot of room for discussion about library books and parental rights and all those things. I think it's a hard, complicated question in some ways. In my mind, the instructional materials is not a hard, complicated question. These are materials that every child is required to read, and certainly I think we can agree that children should not be forced to read about some of the things that are gang rape and sexual violence and underage sexual activity and all kinds of things that are in some places curriculum. Now, I will say that when I did a very lengthy review of the HMH curriculum, for instance, and I'm not a fan of it, but there was nothing sexually explicit in that curriculum. I don't think there's anything in Madison County's curriculum right now that is sexually explicit. And so this is more of a protective thing because there certainly is present in a lot of places. Thankfully, we have the good sense in Madison County not to have allowed it, and this just sort of confirms that we will not allow sexually explicit content in our schools as part of the curriculum. A couple of exceptions to the policy that come in the draft just talks about is that if it's a SOL type thing, if it's an AP class, it's a BI class, it's a dual enrollment class where the curriculum is approved outside of Madison County, then that wouldn't be applied to those materials to allow those students to take part in that. I think the board also has a chance of seeing this in the last week, so we'll kind of move forward, I think, based on, and the board will have a chance to look at it and make comments, et cetera. This is the first step. But certainly in my mind, as I wrote the draft, it was to protect children from sexually explicit content in our curriculum. I don't have any questions about it.
Anybody have any discussion tonight? Okay. Moving on, the very next thing under business information is, again, and I'll try to fill you in, and if I say the wrong thing, I'm just going by memory, so somebody help me out. 2 weeks ago, when we did get together to discuss Governor Youngkin's suggested policy on sexually explicit instructional materials, We'd also discussed what, whether library books would be included in that. There is a caveat in his policy that it doesn't necessarily apply to library books. So at that point, 2 weeks ago, the decision was made that we would focus in on what needed to be done, which is the policy that has to be to him by January the 1st. Am I correct so far? Okay. But Mr. Wingate brought forth to all of us a series of books that were of concern to him. And because we decided that if indeed, and I don't know that we've definitely decided anything yet, but this information was something that Chris wanted to write a policy about to address the library books that he had concerns about. I'm not putting words in your mouth, but is that pretty accurate? So this is what Mr. Wingate has come up with as far as a draft policy that concerns sexually explicit content. So, Mr. Wingate?
So there's no draft. Sorry. There's no draft that's out that's there that we've decided upon. I really wanted to hear the public tonight and hear the board members tonight. So there's not a finalized draft or anything on the library materials, unlike the curriculum materials. Just a couple of points. As I do intend to draft a policy, and the board will decide how to improve it and whether to approve it or not. But just a couple of comments, and I would ask the board to comment too, because as I'm trying to move forward with the policy, I'd like to kind of get the board's ideas and thoughts on it. So I'm not doing this in a vacuum. I guess a couple points. Look, the only reason I'm doing this is I think it matters deeply what we put in children's minds. Some people say it's just a book not checked out on the shelf. I reject that completely and unalterably. When a child browses in a library, Mr. Roots was talking about reading a book in a library, and what goes into a child's mind matters deeply, 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 deeply. That's why the teaching profession is so powerful and important. What these principals are doing, the teachers are doing, it matters what we put in children's minds. That's at the heart of why I'm concerned about some of these books. That's number one. Number two, I'm not going to, it's late, I don't want to go into deep detail about it. I would like to hear from the board members about it. But just to be honest, I'm really aghast that some people think that there's literary value in things like some of the stuff in these books. I am surprised at things like the rape and gang rape and incest and voyeurism, pedophilia, where there's detailed descriptions of a father raping his 11-year-old daughter for a child to read those things. I'm aghast that would occur in our libraries. Now, a parent definitely has every right to decide what their child wants to read, but taxpayers should not be forced to fund things where a father is describing raping his 11-year-old daughter in explicit detail. And I'm not talking about just saying it happened. In the draft, I think we need to say that's not what we're talking about. But I'm talking about how it happened in detailed descriptions and graphic detail of how it happens. I just can't get my mind around people defending that. And just to be honest with that, I just can't, I don't get it. I will try to seek to understand. I have read multiples of these books. I think I've read 4 of these books now. I've scanned all of them. I read 4 of them in total, and it did not change my mind. It strengthened my mind that these are inappropriate for children to read on open shelves. And I think it's a question we have to figure out now is what do we do? Do we have them in a restricted section where parents do have the right to say, let's have these, which is, I think, a reasonable idea, or do we doing them to the public library where the children can certainly access these books? And by the way, I accessed every single one of these books on the Internet Archive as a PDF version of these books for free. So every single person can access these things. It's not like there's an access problem. So if a parent wants a child to read one of these books, then they can certainly do that very easily by going to the internet and reading these books. So it's not an access problem at all. I won't go on and on. I'd like to hear what the board has to say. Think about what the way forward is, if there's a way forward, if there's interest in a way forward, if these 20-some, that's just the ones I found. if there's a way to protect our children, empower parents, and be a community that has some kind of values against some of these things that are being talked about. So I have questions or kind of hear the board thinks.
You have a comment that you would like to make, Mr. Shue?
So I think the way I'm supposed to address this is, Madam Chair, I'd like to address Mr. Wingate's
Been reading
comments.
Roberts way too much.
I agree with Mr. Wingate. Probably am more strict on this than he may even be. I don't think books with sexually explicit content. Now, we have to think about what sexually explicit means. That means sexual acts that is described in detail, all right? That doesn't belong around minor children. And all children in schools are still under the hand of their parents or their guardian up until they've turned 18 and graduated. So they are minors. I would be all for the folks in here that think those books should be in school. I say let's give them those books and they can take them home and have them and just don't bring them back. Or if they want them in a library, gift them to the local library, and that way they can have more of their friends go there and check them out. I mean, whatever we have to do to keep them out of Madison County schools.
Mr. Myers, you have a comment?
I will be brief. I think everyone has to agree that there is a line that you choose, that this is the line you don't cross as far as what we're going to make available to our kids and what the school should be promoting by offering it in the library or wherever. I mean, there is a line, and I think the only discussion is where that line is as far as what we should allow. And anyone who can say that this descriptive sexual acts that are described should be something that we provide for children. And whether or not that is an argument about each specific book or what's inherently in the books, it sounds like a lot more reading than I really want to do. But I mean, if that's what's necessary, then I don't think, I mean, this is a point that's worth discussing. I've heard people say tonight that we shouldn't argue about it. In doing so, we're arguing about it. So apparently it is something that's people are passionate about. But I think, I feel like I have to be held responsible to what God has given me responsibility for, and that is I'm here to help with the education of our kids and to help protect our kids. And, it is something that if you want to allow this, it's not a ban that you can't allow your kid to read it. We as Madison County Public Schools are not going to offer this material and say that it's okay. I do think that there is room for discussion and debate on it. But I think that, there is a common ground that we're going to be able to find as far as where our line is.
I'm sorry, I didn't know.
You're fine. I just don't have a whole lot to add. I agree with Damon. I think there's debate on it, and I think that we can have conversation about it. And I think that we can find common ground and certainly define what our process and policies are going to be. So I propose that we draft something. I don't know what that something is yet, but I propose that we draft something, and I don't think we have to go as fast as we need to go with this one because of January. I think it's good to slow down and get it right, you know, and make sure we do things the right way. So I'm all for a draft, Chris and Mr. Wingate, and we go from there. And you know, we all have input into that for sure. It's not your, you know, it's not your policy. It will ultimately be the board's policy. But we also need to look at, and I have lost the piece of paper I have it written on, the policy, whatever it was that came up, KLB? KLB. I wrote it down and I can't find where I wrote it. KLB, to make sure that it all aligns, the regulations align and everything aligns. But I think there's a way to compromise and make sure everyone is represented as Madison County.
Well, and I hope that everybody up here is right. But I do think we do need to look at the policy we have in hand. We have been using that policy for a number of years, and we just used it last year and did take a book out of our library. So if a parent says that, you know, they have a question, a concern, there's a process, and there was a process that was used at that point. My main concern, and this is not against any particular thing, but I've been trying to educate myself to find out how much of a problem this is. And I know that Ms. Wood pulled the information out of the library for us. And of the 26 books that Mr. Wingate brought to our attention, 3 of them are lost. They're not even in the library anymore. And maybe that's a yay, but just a statement of fact, they're not there. And the first one that I can find was put in 2002. It was put in there. It's been in there 20 years. And that doesn't necessarily mean it's a good or bad, but it's been in there 20 years, and in that time, it's been checked out 12 times, but it hasn't gone out of the library in the last 2 years. So I think we need to look at what do we have and how often is it going out of there, because to me, it's an important piece of information. There are some of the books that I know that Mr. Wingate brought to our attention, too, that were written by Anne Rice, and some of you may be familiar with her. She has written the vampire books, a couple of vampire books. And of those, they were put in the library in 2014, and Interview with a Vampire, no, I'm sorry, Tale of the Body Thief has not been taken out at all. It's never been checked out. And it's just, yeah, that's kind of my thinking too. I wanted to see, where are these books? Are they in our library? And a lot of them have been there for quite a few years. There are 11 books that I counted that have not been checked out in the last 2 years. So, I mean, to me, that's kind of a piece of information that's important. It just says there's no reason to panic because these books are not going off the shelf. We need to slow down, take a look at what we already have, and find out if it's being used. That doesn't mean that I'm saying that there may not be information in here that is a cause of concern, because I realize children's literature has changed dramatically over the last years. It has kind of trickled down from, in some cases, adult literature into some themes that are young adult that maybe are worth taking a look at. But I also think there's no reason to panic here because these books are not being checked out. Ms. Wood, am I correct on? Pardon me? Yes, sir? Yeah, well, we asked to just run to find out how much in circulation are they. Yeah. Well, I mean, to me, pardon me? We don't want to get into discussion. I'm just telling you what I looked at. Well, kind of did, because I kind of opened that door. But I thought perhaps with, and maybe that's an important piece of information, too. I'm not saying these books never go anywhere. I'm just saying, from what the report, we don't need to panic. We don't need to come up with something right now because, one, they're not in circulation because they've been sort of kind of pulled out. The other piece, too, is even when they were in circulation, they were not being checked out. That's what I see. So I think it bears looking at every piece of information we can put our hands on. That's all I'm saying. So that's the only comment I have, and I don't want to open the door again for a public debate because I'm just telling you what I see. And everybody else up here has had their option to say what they see. So I just think we need to take a deep breath, see if we can actually help guide our students and maybe get them reading and checking books out. So, and my opinion is not any more than anybody else's opinion. There's 5 of us up here. I'm just telling you what I looked at. So I also do, while I have an opportunity, want to thank both of our students for coming forward. It's awfully hard to speak. So thank you for that. So I'm going to move on with the next thing, which is the advisory. Wait, am I right? No, the long-range plan. Long-range plan has been talked about, and I think we are ready for business approval. So everybody up here, I think we are ready to vote on the long-range plans. If I could have a motion to approve the long-range plan as presented, please.
I'll make a motion to approve the long-range plan as presented, 2022 to 2027.
Could I have a second?
I'll second it.
Moved and seconded that we approve the long-range plan as presented. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no.
No.
It is 4-1, but the motion carries. The very next thing is school board representatives to the advisory committee. Let's see. What we're doing here tonight is to approve different people to serve on the main school board as represented to the Gifted and Talented Committee for the remainder of the year. Could you help me out a little bit with that as far as what we're trying to accomplish is to replace Dr. Eichelberger? Is that correct? All right. So we've got, and I know you guys can't see this, but we've got 2 committees, the Gifted and Talented Advisory Committee that Dr. Eichelberger was the main lead on, and Nita Collier was the alternate on that. And then there's the Special Education Advisory Committee. Nita was the lead on that one, and Dr. Eichelberger was the alternate. Is there anyone here that would like to be on the Gifted and Talented Advisory
I don't have a lead. I don't have a lead, do I, yet? I'm happy to do that one if you need a lead on something I don't have a lead on yet.
Thank you very much. All right. So we'll now put Chris Wingate in for Dr. Eichelberger on the Gifted and Talented, thank you, committee. And Ms. Collier, I assume you're willing to stay on as the alternate. And then the Special Education Advisory Committee, you are the lead on that, and Dr. Eichelberger was the alternate. Is there anybody that would like to be the alternate on the Special Education Advisory Committee? And if not, I will take that as the alternate. So we now have a full house, I believe, on that. So now that we've made these substitutions, because these were voluntary, I don't think we need to make a motion on
We
that.
do.
But do we?
I think we do.
You think we do?
I
Okay.
think we do.
Yeah, but we did vote on them as a group, and I had forgotten. Okay. So could I have a motion, please, to approve the changes in these two advisory committees?
I'll make a motion to approve those changes to the advisory committee.
Could I have a second?
I'll second.
Been moved and seconded that we approve these two substitutions on the advisory committees. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, no. Right. And the next is to approve the list of the advisory committee members. There is a long list that we're looking at of all kinds of people that are serving on these committees. I'll read them out for you, not the people, but what the committees are, or the advisory boards. Family Life Student Health Advisory, Special Education Advisory, Gifted Advisory, Career and Technical Education Advisory, and I think that's all. So what we would be doing now is just to approve the list of the advisories. Could I have a motion that we approve the list of the advisory committees for 22-23 as presented?
I'll make a motion to approve the list of advisory committee members for 22-23.
Could I have a second? It's been moved and seconded that we approve the list of advisory committee members for the 2022-2023 year as presented. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Motion carries. The last thing under business approval is policy BDDE, rules of order. And there were some changes, I believe, that Mr. Sheeds and Mr. Wingate requested. If I recall, we voted on the rules of order, that be our guiding rule for parliamentary procedure. But then there was something that I think it had to do with looking at it again at the beginning of the year or something like that. Mr. Wingate, would you like to, or Mr. Sheets, would you like to speak to that?
Well, I'm sorry. I'm not a dictator where I want to tell everyone from now on what they have to do. So I think it would be kind for, we elect a new chairman or woman yearly, and if that chairperson is able to convince us that we need to use a different rules of order, then I think they have that prerogative, that right to do so. So I didn't want to just say this is what it's going to be for end all time. So that's why that was in there.
Any discussion that anybody has about that? I think we've seen it.
This was just that we voted to use Robert's Rules of Order, and it's a policy saying that we are using Robert's Rules of Order.
Okay.
And
All right.
I think the only thing that was added that we would vote annually
It's just one more.
to
one
make
more
sure that
housekeeping thing
we,
to do.
yeah. I mean,
Okay.
I'm fine with it.
So could I have motion to approve policy BDDE, rules of order?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Could I have a second? Been moved and seconded that we approve policy BDDE, rules of order, as presented. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Right, policy has been approved. Now, at the end, which is my favorite time, is the reports from the school board members about what we've been doing. And we get to hear from our student representative and the superintendent. Talia, would you like to go first?
I can. So I went to the state fair with several Madison children who represented Madison County at the state level in livestock competition. And if I heard Madison County on the loudspeaker that they won something one time, I heard it many. So we We were little, but we were mighty, and there were lots of kids there and several hundred animals. And Madison County came out with some blue ribbons, red ribbons, banners. We represented well. So we were there from a Wednesday to a Sunday, and it was all great times. And then I have prep board meeting in 2 weeks. And so I will have a report from that next time.
Thank
That's
you.
all I have.
Mr. Sheets?
I'll unpack a few things here. And this is just for thought, when there was a few people that mentioned the KLB policy, and I'll do some looking myself to see what it takes to remove a policy. If we're not happy with it, and we'll get that policy out of the way so that we can do what's right for the children. You know, there's a handful of folks out here in the crowd who basically begged the last board to muzzle our children with masks and shut down our schools for a COVID sickness that had no factual data that it was going to harm children. And here they are arguing that, oh, you can't take these dangerous books, these sexually explicit books out of schools. You know, sometimes I think that there's a number of folks in this county that it doesn't matter what the argument is. They want to be on the opposite side of the argument from myself or someone that thinks my way. The young man that spoke, the student, I commend him for getting up and speaking. I really appreciate it. Takes a lot as a young person to get up and speak. I really appreciate that. And it takes me back to when I was a student in school. And I knew everything, and my parents knew nothing. And now that I'm a parent, I tell my kids the same thing. You don't know yet. You haven't made it there yet. But they think the same. They know everything, and I know nothing. And, you know, if it's okay to keep sexually explicit content in the library, then why not put a smoking vending machine, cigarette vending machine, or some beer in school? You know, we'll let teachers guard whether or not they take part in that. Doesn't make sense to me. Appreciate some other comments that were made. Mrs. Wood, I really, really do appreciate you bringing up that work session where I said that I didn't trust librarians. Only I didn't say I didn't trust librarians. I want to thank Miss Becky Thompson for the Mad Rap Recorder. And I have a video, if anyone would like to see it, that I never uttered the words, I don't trust our librarians. I specifically stated that I didn't trust the librarian that had quit. I received, so 9/26 was the work session. Didn't know there was a problem. 2 days later, got a phone call from a friend, a dear friend, that I would consider as close as any family member. And she was very upset that I didn't trust her in the library. And I didn't know what she was talking about. So she told me to read the Mad Rap article. And I did. And then I called her back to let her know that the article was wrong. I've called Chuck Jackson to ask him for a correction and an apology, and I haven't received a response. I'm very disappointed in the news agencies that we have in Madison County that can't get the truth right, can't quote someone right, and they're the dividing factor in this county. It's very, very frustrating. So, Mrs. Wood, I never said I didn't trust you, but because you read an article from Mad Rap and believed it right from the get-go, if you want to earn my trust, please earn my trust, I guess. I don't know what to say at this point. Lastly, Mrs. Besposo, is she still here? No, she's gone.
See her.
She mentioned some Bible chapters out of the Bible, some books, Genesis, Ezekiel, some chapters and some verses. And there's a difference between stories in the Bible that contain this stuff, and that's that it's mentioned. It's not detailed. Sexually explicit, as I mentioned before, is explained in detail. And the acts that have happened in the Bible have a historical value and are not explained in detail. Also, she mentioned something about a child taking a book home, and I think she got that story from me because I brought that up in that work session. And the situation went as this. There was an assigned book to my child at school, and the letter was sent out because it was considered controversial. And we checked into the book, and we did not agree that our daughter should read that book. So we signed the form and told him, we do not want our child reading this book. We would like to have another option. And that was agreed upon. Only to see that the child had brought the book home after it was given to her by the teacher and a few days later. Yes, when children make a mistake, there needs to be some repercussions to let them know they made a mistake. But when you have a 15-year-old child who's received a book from a grown, trusted educator that the parents told that educator they didn't want their child to have, I can hardly punish my daughter for that. And therefore, we fussed at the teacher. And Mrs. Alexander helped us with that and made all that right, and I appreciate her work for that. So I hope I straightened some of this stuff up a little bit. Becky, maybe you can get the story better next time. That's all.
Mr. Wingate?
Just want to thank the principals for all their work and all the effort that they're doing, trying to get us out of the hole that was created by nobody here, way outside our control. So thank you all very, very much for all your efforts. It's not an easy task you've been saddled with. So thank you very much for your dedication. Second of three things, just beg the news organizations here to realize the seriousness of what happens when they get things wrong. And unfortunately, it's happened multiple times with particular news organizations. And I just ask them to think of what they do to people when they fail in ways that are hurtful to the community. And last, kind of responding to the chairwoman's comments, because I think I just want to respond a little bit. Certainly, I agree that we shouldn't panic and et cetera, and you can pull out some quick things about what numbers of books are checked out. But I'm kind of depressed. I leave depressed tonight that some the members on the board and the public aren't really worried by graphic depictions of things like a father raping his 11-year-old daughter. I mean, it's just to me that's so worrisome, and that our culture can't see that's bad to have as open access where my child can go and browse in the library shelf. That if we can't see that's a problem, I just don't know what kind of foundation that we can build from. So I'm just kind of depressed about that, and hope that we can all think about that. And I would charge people to read some of those books, as I've done, and think about a 14-year-old child reading that, not a 45-year-old person, not a 35-year-old person, but a 14-year-old person reading about those things, and what that puts in their mind for the rest of their life, rest of their eternal life. I mean, it's an eternal thing. I mean, what goes into your mind matters so much. And so I would just ask you to think about that and take it seriously. Thank you.
I just want to take just a moment to just take Mr. Graham Davison's advice and be encouraging. Tonight we've heard from our administrators, and Thursday we did a walkthrough at Waverly Owl, and you know, it's encouraging to see what the teachers and administrators are doing in our schools. I know the classrooms that we were in a science classroom where it was so interactive with the students, and they were each getting up and presenting, and you know, it was incorporating not just science, but writing and critical thinking skills and public speaking. And I even got to go into one of my kids' classrooms and watch how they work with them in the reading specialist time that they had. I don't know if that was push in or push out. I assume it was push in. But it was really encouraging to see, I mean, because you guys have a hard job because you're trying to teach kids who don't really want to learn. And that's basically a job of parents, and the job the teachers also inherent as educators is, you know, our kids mostly are lazy, and I mean, and so to be able to motivate them to learn is a tough task, and just some of the I forget the teacher's name, so we were in. But I mean, it was like a book that they were reading about things that didn't work. I don't know, it was so interesting, the stuff that they were engaging in, and they were taking something that was fun to read and making it a learning process, and it just, with the Waverly Owl specifically, from just visiting them this week, it was very, very encouraging to see what they're doing.
So I guess I'll go, you want me to go ahead last, and then we'll go to the most important person here, or at that end of the table. I just wanted to say, I haven't really attended a whole lot of meetings. I went to a great football game. It wasn't this past one, but I went to a great football game. It was wonderful to see how exciting the children were, and the parents, and it was just nice to see that part. The other thing that I just want to say to everybody, because I think people sometimes, when you express yourself, which all of us have that First Amendment right to express ourselves and not be depressed or anything else, is that as we were reminded on our very first meeting, and I don't know how many of you recall that meeting, but we were reminded how very, very important words were, and how an encouraging word to somebody can make all the difference in the world. And when we watch our words and we say what we want to say, it really bothered me tonight, and I'm going to take it very much to heart myself, that there are people who think that the board is not the most effective board, and that we could not do a better job in supporting our teachers, our librarians, and our administrators that work hard. And to me, that matters a lot, that people think that we don't do as good a job as we could, because I've always been proud of Madison County, and I will be, always. But I also think that it's important for this board to be able to do that as well. And I'm sure everybody thinks that they are, but I'm going to take it very seriously and try to do my very best to always be a positive light and make the best decisions that we can. And that's really all I have to say, and that's way off the topic, but I appreciate you guys that have lasted all this time and have stayed with us to the very end. And please, Mr. Carter.
There we go. The general happenings over at the high school, at the end of the month, we're looking to have a spooktacular type event where we're going to invite some primary school kids over to the high school to trick or treat at the teachers' doors and just look and see what the high school looks like. Get to meet some of the high schoolers. And next Saturday, the FFA is hosting a harvest festival. About 60 people RSVP'd for that, so that's going to be all the proceeds for that go to the FFA, so it's a great fundraiser for them. And homecoming last month was a hit. There was a lot of school spirit showed that week, and it was really great to see everybody come out for the football game that night and for the homecoming dance the next night. So everything's going great at the high school. We got a lot of good plans, and that's all it for October, but we have much more on the way.
Thank you, Ms. Reese.
Am I on? Yes. I'll follow up with another positive note that's kind of reiterating what some people have already said. But to our principals that are still here, school improvement is an ongoing process, so it goes way beyond those slides you saw tonight. They didn't just throw those slides together. That's the work of a lot of analyzing data, working with their teacher teams and staff members, and researching the best practices and just continuously monitoring that and deciding whether or not this is working and what else can we think to do. So I just wanted to kind of end the board meeting with, again, thanking the principals, because that's an extremely hard job. It's hard to keep everything together in your building. I just want everyone to know that up here, we know that.
Thank you. Could I have a motion to adjourn, please?
So moved.
Could I have a second? Moved and seconded that we adjourn. We are adjourned.